All right, good evening and welcome everybody. This is a regular session of the Burns Township Board of Education. The board has already met in executive session and we have saluted the flag at that time. Right now, can I have a quick roll call, please?
Mr. Salmon?
Here.
Ms. White?
Here.
Ms. Light?
Here.
Ms. Hira?
Here.
Ms. McCune?
Here.
Mr. Molinari?
Here.
Mr. Amin?
Here.
Ms. Chipak?
Here.
And Mr. Rashid?
Yes. Here.
Okay, I'll just read out the rest of the public notice that I'm going to do. Notice of the time and place of this meeting was provided, and copies of that resolution were forwarded to the official newspapers as designated by the Board of Education, and to the Township Clerk, and a copy of the notice was posted on the bulletin board of the Board of Education offices in accordance with PL 1975, Chapter 231A. Copies are also available in the front and online. And that will bring us up to our student representative, Petra.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome back from spring break. I hope everyone had a wonderful time with their families. With, I think, 34 days left in the school year, I am sure your students are itching for the summer break, but there is still so much more left to happen. So today, seniors started the Seniors Honors Incentive Program, meaning some students will be off campus for lunch. So if you want to stay off the road from 10:30 to 11:25, I wouldn't blame you. I personally am so excited for our first Culture Day on Friday of this week. Make sure to check out all of the different booths. Support Ridge Gives Back by purchasing a dozen Krispy Kreme donuts to be delivered on Friday, May 5th. Make sure to order your yearbook as they are still up for sale. The Big Sibling Program is seeking donations of activities and other such things for the siblings to use together. Ridge International Dance Ensemble held their showcase last Friday. Please donate new socks to veterans for the RHS Veterans Club outside of the main office. There will be student voter registration during lunch tomorrow in the cafeteria, where students over the age of 17 can register to vote. Ridge Gives Back activity signups open today for seniors, and the junior prom is on Thursday, April 27th. As well, AP testing is beginning next week. In terms of athletics, Ridge Boys Golf narrowly lost their last match by just 1 stroke. Ridge Girls Golf won their last match. The boys lacrosse team won its last game. The girls lacrosse team lost their last game. The boys tennis team lost their last match. The boys volleyball team won their last game and have only lost 1 time this entire season. Girls softball lost their last game, and my Whams girls lacrosse team also won their game today, 11-5, and is undefeated this season. And that is all for today, everyone. As we have spent much of the last week on spring break, we have not had all that much going on, but we do have a lot of amazing things that are starting this week. Again, remind your students to remain in good spirits and that you are proud of them so that we all finish off the year strongly. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for our student representative? Seeing none, thank you, Petra. At this time, the board will go down to the audience and we will watch the presentations coming up from William Ann and Ridge.
Thank you. My name is Karen Hudak, and I am the principal of William Ann Middle School. I am here this evening to give you a spotlight on one of our upcoming events that is next week at the middle school called the Whams Expo. I want to share with you a little bit about what that program is and talk about what you're able to see. Anyone in the community is welcome to come to the expo, which showcases amazing talents of our students. And so this expo has been happening for over 12 years at the middle school. It's an opportunity for our students to show all of their talents inside and outside of the classroom. It cultivates a sense of community, and it facilitates a lot of the learning that is going in the classroom outside in a manner in which it's a gallery walk. And so as I shared with you, this is the 12th year. Think you to Mr. John McCarthy, who volunteers his time every single year to organize and run this program with a list of his other colleagues that donate their time. They really turn the middle school into a showcase. It looks like a gallery. It looks like a museum, from the cafeteria to the hallways. I'll show you some pictures of how they transform our entire building really into a walking gallery. You'll see work from our students from the multiple disciplines, from our numerous clubs that we have working at the middle school. You'll see photography and linguistics and Spanish and language arts and science and foods, and all of them represented. We even have our amazing orchestra performing at these events, as well as our dance ensemble is dancing away in the cafeteria for those who would like to experience. It's a night full of arts and festivities. And so I pulled some of our pictures from our prior events just to give the Board of Education and the public here tonight a little window of what you'll see if you join us next week. And so here we have Mr. McGowan, who our chamber orchestra was playing on the front lawn because we shut down the Oval. And they were playing on the front oval for anyone who was coming in to see. We also had our full ensemble singing as well. In addition, there's our gymnasium really transformed into a gallery. And in that gallery, you will see a lot of different types of works from students displayed, not just the artistic one. And one of the quotes that one of the teachers sent me today was from a participant who came and who was there to see their own work, which you can also stop at different tables and the kids will explain to you their projects or their work. But they were amazed by how somebody could make an international breakfast activity out of toilet paper. So I'll leave that as a hook for you to come and see it as well. Here's a sample of the cherry blossom work that our students did, and underneath it, they also talk about pollination and bee awareness and the impacts to the cherry blossoms, so it's both the scientific and the artistic version. Here's an example of some of our showcased work by our 6th grade students, where in their language they are doing a description with proper nouns and adjectives and verbs of themselves. And you can see this from our Spanish 6th grade showcase. Another example of some of the work that our students in 6th grade art cycle will display with their still life and their mixed media collages. Every year that I come, I'm amazed at the extraordinary talents of our students, and there are some that I stand there and I'm like, am I in a middle school or am I in a museum somewhere in the city? It blows me away. Our photography displays with their joiners, their black and white photography that they're taught with their obscure cameras in our photo program are also displayed, and so much more. And here's that cross-curricular piece where we're talking about learning about the eruptions and the earthquakes and the black holes in science classes, but then they're making 3D models to represent them within their courses and then displaying and explaining to those of you a little bit more about how they learned and built those 3D models. Here's another example of erosion where they applied their knowledge of the Earth's surface and weathering and their impacts before and after. And again, they will go on and on about how they created their model and the differences of those things. And here are just some random selections of pictures of artistics from the past that you will see, whether it's clay structures, whether it's photos, whether it's sculptures. There's much to see, and our amazing team of teachers will also be there to explain. As you can see, we have a group of students up in the corner talking to a parent about their projects and their simulations. So our expo is next week, and so I encourage all of you to come to the evening. It's a wonderful opportunity for us to showcase all of the talents of our students in and outside of our classroom. It's free, and so please join us from 5:30 to 8 in William Manning. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Julia Koch. I teach French at Ridge High School, and I am also one of the, am I good? Oh, okay. I am also one of the coordinators for Ridge Gives Back. One of the things that I am most excited about this year, this is our 2nd year of doing Ridge Gives Back as a full school-wide, everybody participating type of event, is that we're very fortunate to have a group of extremely dedicated students, some of whom are here with us tonight. They have been working incredibly hard liaising with nonprofits, figuring out the best way to connect with local businesses, and also kind of taking some time to examine the why behind the causes that are most important to them. One of those students has generously agreed to share a few of her thoughts with us this evening, so if you would be so kind as to help me welcome Lena Mathai.
Good evening, esteemed members of the Board of Education, parents, and teachers. I'm honored to speak with you today to express my continued support for the Ridge Gives Back program, and more specifically, our student consultant portion. As Teresa Jones mentioned, a student consultant, Ridge Gives Back is a school-wide day of service that provides students and teachers an opportunity to give back to our larger community in addition to having fun. By allocating resources toward this initiative, we enable our students to engage in experiences that foster and development of crucial components, including, but not limited to, leadership, networking, and partnership building. The ripple effects of this program transcend mere community service, as it inspires a sense of civic duty in our students and affords them competitive advantages in college applications, because let's be real, that's a huge part of high school. As the research conducted by DoSomething.org highlights, up to 80% of college admissions officers look at volunteer experience in community service in student applications. Last year, Ridge Gives Back had a remarkable turnout and worked with over 1,800 students to provide over 10,000 hours of community service. This endeavor has been highly successful, thanks to the unwavering help and commitment of our proficient faculty and staff, especially Ms. Koch, Ms. Baker, and Ms. Whalen. Our students strive to continue this event and continue to help. This year marks the first instance in which students have played the role of consultants, and this has proven to be a remarkable experience. As a member of this small yet formidable team, I have experienced firsthand the tremendous growth and dedication involved in executing a successful event. At our first meeting in October, we discussed our visions for Ridge Gives Back. During our last Friday's meeting, right before break, we developed solutions to overcome challenges, identified areas that needed improvement, planned fundraisers, and stayed after school to make sure things got done. As a student consultant, I've had the privilege of working alongside this dedicated team of individuals to organize and execute such a wonderful event, and I'm looking forward to so much. The RGB consultant program has enabled me to develop my leadership skills, hone in my ability to present my ideas in a thorough and professional manner. Finally, one of the most rewarding aspects of Ridge Gives Back has been the strong bond our team has developed. You can see that tonight by the fact that 3 out of the 5 of our team members have shown up here to support me. We have invested countless hours planning and executing diverse undertakings, foregoing study halls, utilizing entire lunch breaks, and extending our school days by staying after school for multiple hours sometimes. And despite the workload and pressure, we have maintained a positive and supportive atmosphere. I attribute this to the mentorship and guidance provided by, once again, Ms. Baker, Ms. Whalen, and Ms. Koch, who have been our unwavering cheerleaders and throughout this entire process. In conclusion, Ridge Gives Back is an exceptional program and benefits both our communities and our students. I urge you all to continue to support this transformative initiative and its student consultant aspect, as it equips students with crucial skills that to serve them well. Thank you so much, and please support us. Thank you.
So I don't think that anyone's going to follow that, so we can all go home now. Thank you so much, Lena. One of the things that has really made this year especially powerful, not only have we had students kind of really in the planning process with us, but we have also been incredibly fortunate to be able to spread our initiatives out over several months. The students have staffed volleyball games, so many different sporting events, choir concerts, plays. They've been, talking to people in the community and letting them know what they're doing, and more importantly, why they're doing it. I'm also here this evening to ask for your help. Anything that we try to do is going to be relatively expensive simply because of the volume of people that we're working with, that we're talking about. So we have an Amazon wish list that is up on the screen in several different ways. And if you prefer a carrier pigeon or a smoke signal, let me know and I can totally make that happen. There are also flyers on a table in the back, so feel free to grab one when you leave. If you are willing to buy something off of our Amazon wish list and have it sent to us, we would greatly appreciate it. That will enable our students to be able to put together care packages for veterans, for new moms, for kids entering foster care for the first time. So many different initiatives that we can accomplish with your help. If you have any questions, our email address is up there as well. Please don't hesitate to contact us, and thank you so much for your attention and support.
Okay, that was great. Great to see what's going on at Whams and Ridge. That's going to bring us up to our superintendent's report. There are 4 items under the report. Can I have a motion, please? Ms. White? Mr. Salmon? Any questions on the items? Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Salmon?
Yes.
Ms. White?
Yes.
Ms. Light?
Yes.
Ms. Hira?
Yes.
Ms. McCune?
Yes.
Mr. Molinari?
Yes.
Mr. Amin?
Yes.
Ms. Chipak?
Yes.
And Mr. Rashio?
Yes.
Mr. McCarron?
Okay, thank you very much. So with respect to the superintendent's report, I just wanted to highlight quickly the items were some bus evacuation drills. We always have to document when we have our bus evacuation drills at the various schools. We had our HIB report as well as approving an overnight trip for forensics. I wanted to mention also, and we will make sure that we include this in the minutes for those of you that are interested, because I know this question has come up a few times, with respect to HIB reports and statistics for the first half of the 2022-23 school year. Those numbers will be provided on a link. It is titled Safety Data Report for Reporting Period 1. For anyone that's interested, we'll be sure to include that in the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. McCarron? Okay, that's going to move us to public comment on agenda items. Public comment on agenda items, as we discussed last meeting, will be limited to 30 minutes, 3 minutes per person. On the second public comment, there will be no limit, so if you don't get in first, you can get in second. Please come up, keep it to 3 minutes or less, sign in, and state your name and address.
Good evening. Janice Corrado, 8 Lone Oak Road. I'd like to ask a question with regard to decisions about textbook approval. What specific objective criteria does the board use to approve or disapprove textbooks after they are recommended by teachers and administrators? Is there a rubric that you can share with the public? It's my personal belief that board members who have objections to a specific recommended text should individually state very clearly what their objections are, and this information should be shared with the public in the interest of transparency. Thank you.
Debbie Marcus, 16 Lafayette Lane. I actually agree with the previous speaker that we should have some general rubric for books going forward. I will say that the book that's currently under exploration definitely kind of, I think, would hit all the check boxes anyway. I only took a brief look at it, and my issue with it is that it does present the topic, but it's presented in a way where one ideology is just promoted, in which, I mean, I don't mind different ideologies are promoted, but it's not done in a way that endeavors for good, true discussion of the topics. The authors themselves have an interesting background. One of them specializes in studying dead celebrities and their fans, and the other one focuses on culture amongst rock musicians. So that does make me pause, but I can still respect that they would have general knowledge of the subject. In the introduction, they themselves state that they changed the letter B, to be capitalized for every time they reference blacks, but not the W in whites, because whites don't share culture or history, which, again, I can agree with that, but many blacks don't share the same narrative history either, and it's insulting to Nigerian and other immigrants to suggest that all Africans have the same history. There's a note also about chapter 2 about the added context about a whole section on the racist origins of fat phobia. I don't think that encouraging people to be healthy is a phobia. The author states one study that promoted this perspective instead of educating our kids that they should try to be healthy. And although you don't want to be mean to anyone based on body type, it should not be promoted as ideal. The book notes in chapter 3 that they add a focus on bathroom bills and the danger to non-binary community by rejection of them. They do not even mention the danger to people being raped by people of the opposite genitalia in their bathrooms, the most well-known of being in Loudoun County, Virginia. In fact, not only is it not mentioned, but this book claims on page 70 that there is no evidence of any reason to restrict bathrooms and changing rooms to be separated by sex. They also present the BLM movement as an ideal with a picture of leaders who actually stole millions from their supporters for personal use and encouraged people to loot. Now, I accept that some people do think that BLM is something to aspire to in their movement, but other people consider what they did as crimes. And so it's an opinion of how you view the group, but it's not presented as such. It's only presented in a positive manner. There's also phrases such as, many of us watched in horror as something happened. Well, there are many people actually who, whatever the event was they're talking about, I can give examples separately, didn't watch in horror, but were supporting it. And it's not presented as if there's like any different opinions in our whole country. There's a lot of fawning over the current president's policies. And I mean, even if I agree with some of the policies, many of them were in effect not effective, and that was concluded before this book was even published. Okay, my last sentence. My main issue is that they focus on a lot of anti-consumerism, Antifa, anti-Malthusians, anti-miscegenation, anti-racist allies, anti-sodomy laws, antitrust legislation, and anti-vaxxers. But you know what word is not mentioned in the book that is a much bigger factor in raw numbers and percentage and affects society today more than all of those put together? Anti-Semitism. Thank you.
Sherry Nelson, 195 Smoke Rise Road. The New Jersey School Board Association's website has a frequently asked questions section that gives a lot of information about what the role of Board of Education members are in the state of New Jersey. And it states that the board is required by state law to approve courses of study, including all textbooks and materials. The board should ask its administrators to demonstrate how these curriculum materials will help students achieve the state's core curriculum content standards. The board establishes what will be taught, when and where it will be taught, and to whom it will be taught, and with what materials. That's what you guys are doing. That's what our Board of Education has always done. I'm not really sure why a couple of books coming up is such a hot topic that all of a sudden everyone's got to explain exactly how they make these decisions. Maybe it should have been done all along, but where were these questions in other years? This is the normal process. You approve the textbooks, and it is your authority to do it. I don't really see why every single book has to be justified to the entire public personally. I think it's something our district's been doing for decades.
Annika Forzani, 45 Dawn Drive. Just to build on what's been said, I personally, and every single parent that I have spoken to, want textbook decisions to be made by the teachers and the curriculum experts who are working in the relevant departments. So let me be clear, we know board members have to sort of approve, but we do not want board members to make the textbook decisions. I don't care if you're a board member that I agree with you on everything else. Unless you have expertise in the field, then you should be approving what the experts and the teachers in the department are recommending. They're the ones that have the expertise. They're the ones that will be using the material in the classrooms. So if you're a math teacher, if one of you are a math teacher, by all means, give input on the math textbook. If you've got a PhD in history, feel free to give input on the history textbook. But otherwise, I will never believe that a BOE member with no educational experience in the field who will not be teaching the material is better at making the decision on a textbook than a team of teachers and experts. And, you know, you can take, everybody's going to have a different opinion. You start taking, you know, one parent's opinion versus another parent's opinion, everyone's going to want something different. And so you shouldn't. You should trust the teachers and the experts who are teaching the material. I believe that if a board member rejects a recommended textbook, I see one of two reasons. One, the board member really feels that they know better than the experts in a subject, which I personally believe is narcissistic. Or two, they're trying to implement a political agenda, and neither of these reasons is appropriate. It's just a very, very slippery slope when you stop accepting the recommendations of the teachers. Or not, you know, reject him because you don't like a page here or there. And it's a move that I personally would condemn most strongly and would actually lose faith in the members who are voting that way. In addition, if you're overriding decisions of the experts, you're also undermining the job of the teachers and curriculum experts in our district. So just think about how you would feel in your current job if someone with no experience, who's been on the job for maybe 4 months, overrode your expert decision when you've been working in the subject for years or maybe for decades. I think you'd feel pretty terrible. And we've talked a lot about teacher retention, and rejecting the recommendation of experts will certainly incentivize good people to leave our district and keep other good people from joining our district. I've already heard about teachers being approached and poached by other districts. This should be a huge concern to everyone on the BOE, as it's your responsibility to help us retain good teachers. Trusting teachers and letting them have the final say in the decisions affecting their departments is certainly one very important way to do that. I would also ask the head of the curriculum committee to please be completely transparent about what exactly is being said in the curriculum meetings. And I'm stating this now to really avoid any problems with this in upcoming votes. I really, really don't want to have headlines about our district that indicate that we're banning books or rejecting teacher-recommended textbooks. Certainly that's not a district that I would want to be a part of, and I'm certain it would turn people off from moving or working here as well. Thank you.
Hi, I'm John Pettit from 65 Crossroad. Oh, I guess just leave it right there. Yeah. So I appreciate, by the way, all the time that you all put in on behalf of the district. It's really nice of you guys to give your time like that. Maybe I see things a little bit differently than some of the speakers, but I feel like the taxpayers need a voice here too. And might be people, there could be people who don't even have children in the district, but they still deserve a voice because their money is being spent on the district. So we all want the school district to be great. We want the students to have access to the best. I mean, a lot of people move here for that very reason. So we want the school district to be great. So I think we're all on the same page with that. But in terms of selecting the textbooks, you know, I was at a get-together with some parents, and it was really interesting, like when a book they brought up. So the last woman who was speaking mentioned the professionals who picked the book. So this one was interesting, and I thought I would just bring it to everyone's attention. It's called Unwind. So it says that there was a second civil war. It was called the Heartland War. It was fought over abortion. And what happened is they settled the war, and the two sides agreed that there would be no more abortion, but the kids could actually be basically killed or like used for their body parts when they get to the age of 13. And the parents would choose to unwind, was the term, allow their children to be unwound. So they basically would be put into like a comatose state, and their body parts could be just taken and used by other people, as opposed to having an abortion, right? So the kids, some of the kids are like being chosen to be unwound by the parents, and so they feel left out and all this stuff. And there's one situation where there's an accident, and one of the kids, the parents allow him to be unwound because he was in an accident. And his body parts get used by all these other kids who are injured. And then the father has a party where he goes around to visit like his son's body parts in all these other homes where his kids' body parts are like basically living there. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, like my parents thought Catcher in the Rye was like very edgy because, you know, because Holden Caulfield had like bad manners or was like rude, you know, and this is like being utilized in school districts today. I think, like, you know, the Hippocratic Oath for doctors, it says first do no harm. I think we just have to think about what we might be doing to harm the children. And if there's a chance that we're harming the children with the curriculum, I think we have to choose not to do that. Thank you.
Anybody else for public comment? Anyone online?
Hello, Mr. Kim. You're in the Zoom meeting to make a public comment. If you're ready, you can state your name, address, and make your comment at this time. Hello, Braden. You are in the Zoom meeting to make a public comment. Oh, they're gone. They're gone. Yeah, they're both gone.
Okay, first public comment is closed. That's going to bring us to approval of minutes. Can I have a motion, please? Ms. White, Ms. Light? Any questions? Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Salmon?
Yes.
Ms. White?
Yes.
Ms. Light?
Yes.
Ms. Hira?
Yes.
Ms. McCune?
Yes.
Mr. Molinari?
Yes.
Mr. Amin?
Yes.
Ms. Chipak?
Yes.
And Mr. Rashio?
Yes.
Okay, that's going to bring us to the Finance Committee report. There are 28 items, because you removed one, right?
Okay.
29, we'll get a motion on the items and we'll have them.
Yep.
Okay, there are 29 items on the report. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Kuhn? A second? Ms. Light? Questions or discussions on the items?
Yeah, do you want me to do the report first?
Going to do the report first?
Okay.
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay, so the first agenda item at this committee was providing a second bus stop for families that are in separation. The Finance Committee was asked to revisit the policy of charging residents for a secondary school bus stop. The committee discussed various concerns related to this as one resident is asking for this accommodation. The committee currently recommends that no changes be made to the existing policy at this time. Accommodation should not be provided, and should conditions change related to busing, this can be addressed again at a later time. Sorry about that. The second item relates to employee benefits. We were approached by our insurance provider, AG Gallagher, and they're asking that they provide a benefits online portal to the district employees. This portal would be provided for free in exchange for selling a variety of voluntary benefits such as pet insurance and legal assistance. A general discussion arose on the following questions that were raised. What would the district want to offer this as a bargaining chip during the next set of contract negotiations? What is the cost to the district for these benefits? Would there be an increased administrative cost for payroll administration? Would employees be able to select benefit options as part of the portal? The answer to that was yes. Are there any concerns about quid pro quo situations? And would the benefits plan document need to be updated if offered? And how would any data collected on the portal or as a result of these benefits be used? Are there any data privacy concerns? The general consensus was that the committee would be in favor of offering the additional benefits, assuming the questions that were asked were favorable to the district as well as its employees, and that the district should not use this as a bargaining chip and provide this benefit in the new fiscal year. These benefits would have no increase in benefits expense to the district. We provided some next steps. The third item was facilities asset inventory. So the Finance Committee received 2 proposals to conduct a walkthrough and documentation of the facilities and provide an inventory of all capital assets. The 2 options presented were one for our district architect of record that can provide a less comprehensive assessment that would also require the firm to outsource to its engineers any assessment related to mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection assessments. The report provided would be Excel-based, and the estimated cost would be $56,500. The second proposal was from School Dude, now named Brightly, submitted a proposal for approximately $108,000. This proposal was more comprehensive and included what Spiesel proposed, but also included equipment barcode tagging, a preventative maintenance schedule, and the uploading of all data into the district assets management solution when available. The Finance Committee is recommending going forward with the second, more comprehensive review. This review is necessary to evaluate and inventory district assets, determine the needs for the update to the long-range capital plan, and to more timely maintain and repair assets. The Facilities and Operation Committee has been discussing purchasing an asset management solution for the business office so that the administration and maintenance of the district's capital assets can be more efficient, timely, and less costly to the district. As such, this inventory is necessary to derive the asset population into the system. The Finance Committee requested that Mr. Rollo arrange a demonstration of Brightly's asset management solution at the next Finance and Operations Committee session, and also asked what other modules that Brightly has for school districts that are not currently being utilized in the estimated cost. The fourth item is capital projects that were greenlit from the Facilities Committee. The first item was an invoice that needed to be, we have some resolutions on the board agenda tonight about approving some credits. Essentially, there's 4 resolutions, I believe, maybe a 5th at this point. Jim can correct me if I'm wrong, but they reduced to a reduction in cost of the work of about $8,200. And then there was a subsequent change order that would result in another $1,500 of credit. The second item from the Finance Committee were the ADA renovations for the walkway down to Lee Field. The F&O Committee recommended that the district pursue basically the installation, grading installation and installment of sidewalks and handrails from the 400 wing down to the bleachers to make it wheelchair accessible. The cost of this would be paid for through the capital or maintenance reserve. The Finance Committee recommends moving forward with this project as soon as possible. The committee discussed reaching out to the town and the co-op to avoid having to go to RFP for this work. The contractor would need to be approved by June, and the resolution would need to be approved prior to moving forward to take any funds out of the capital reserve. The long-range capital plan would need to be updated through this resolution. However, the goal would be to have this completed over the summer and ready for use by the 2023-2024 school year. The district spoke with, for the third item in this, the district is the Astor Field Road Paving Project. The district spoke with the township engineer on what the district would need to provide related to plans for the road paving in order for the township's contractors to complete the work. I was given a to-do to reach out to the township to make sure we were all on the same page with engineering proposals, and we've since received validation that we can actually move forward without going to engineering for this, and we will be working with the town to facilitate that going forward. The Annan Loop paving project, the district received estimates and also spoke with the Department of Public Works at the township. Patching the driveway would not cost much, however, it won't solve the issues with the driveway in the long term. There currently is not a proper base to support the pavement. The recommendation from the F&O committee is to get this designed by an engineer and then either go to RFP or reach out to the co-op for contracting. The bids received from the engineer were $35,000 or $29,000, depending on the two that we got. However, there were some superfluous costs in each bid related to construction administration that can be removed, as Mr. Markarian and Mr. Rollo felt this was a task that Mr. Perrin could perform given the size of the project, and that would reduce the bids to $27,000 or $20,000 just for the engineering. The committee discussed looking for community volunteers to donate their services for these types of projects going forward. Mr. Rollo was asked to investigate any legal issues with this arrangement and how any donations of services could be accepted by the district and what arrangements would need to be put in place to mitigate any legal liability to the district. The final major thing that we discussed was a banking update. At one of the prior Finance Committee meetings, the members requested that Mr. Rollo look into how the district is investing and managing funds. Currently, the district has the following banking investment assets. In Kearney Savings, we have $3.5 million earning 2.5% interest. The New Jersey Cash Management Fund holds $9.6 million in earnings in money in cash, earning 4.39%. And at Wells Fargo, we have $28.3 million that's earning 0.7% annually and charging banking fees. Balances at Kearney Savings and Wells Fargo are insured above the FDIC limit through Gupta and are not at risk, while the New Jersey Cash Management Fund is invested in securities and has a level of risk associated with it. Through initial discussion with Kearney Savings, the bank indicated that they would be willing to go to 3.75% currently, and if the district moved more money to the bank, they could go as high as 4.75%. Sorry. Initial discussions with Wells Fargo indicated that the bank would be willing to increase their rate to 4.47% if the Wells Fargo checking account would use a Wells Fargo sweep account. This simple change will result in an estimated increase in earnings to $1.5 million annually, where in the 2021 and 2022 fiscal year, these earnings totaled $37,000. Cash management in this interest rate environment makes all the difference in the world and is very important to keep on top of going forward. The committee reviewed the pro forma statement for moving Wells Fargo checking funds into the Wells Fargo sweep account, and in order to avoid service fees, the district must keep $3 million in that account. However, even with that balance, it is estimated that the district pays a significant amount of fees that need to be further quantified to Wells Fargo. The committee believes that the district is in a position where it should pay nothing in service fees. Members of the committee offered to use their expertise to collaborate with Mr. Rollo to identify the best ways to manage the district's significant cash reserves using New Jersey Gupta banks in a way that increases revenue and also minimizes banking fees. One of the items on the agenda tonight is the debt service refinance. Currently, essentially, we're not in a position that we can refinance the bonds because of the interest rate environment. However, the 2013 bond tranche is available for refinancing. So it was Mr. Rollo's recommendation that we approve the refinance, and should the interest market change, then we would be poised to move forward with that refinancing option and take advantage of the savings. And we would not move forward with that unless there is a 3% savings to net present value, including any fees to refinance. Other items were related to Aramark that are confidential, and that's pretty much it.
Any questions for finance?
Oh, yeah. Okay, numbers on the agenda, numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 are standing items. Number 5 is, maybe, Nick, could you actually discuss the Liberty Corner PTO donation?
So I think we had a typo on number 5 and number 27 on the agenda. 27 was that late arrival of information with respect to the driveway engineering for Ridge. So we need to table 5 and 27 from the vote.
Okay, so we will not be voting on 5 and 27 this evening. Number 6 is a routine item. Number 7 is the co-op renewal, right, in the participation of the renewal. Number 8 is a typical annual item. Number 10 is approval of Boswell Engineering Professional Services, and that is for the loop. Nick?
Sorry, this is language just to clarify the resolutions that we've made for Boswell Engineering in general to illustrate that they're done under professional services law.
Okay.
So that's why we added that.
Okay. Number 11 is to approve the ROD grants for the projects that we're requesting state funding for. Number 12 is the item related to the school bonds that I just discussed. Number 13 through 17 are routine items related to students. Number 18 is a stipulation of settlement in a confidential matter. Number 19 is also refunding the school bonds. It looks like that's on there twice. Number 20 through 23 are the items that I previously discussed related to the change orders on the science project that's resulting in refunds of fees. The number 24, can you discuss that, Nick?
Jim, you want to take that one? That's related to the Oak Street roof project.
Yeah, this is a change order from the Oak Street roof project. That's a deduct change order of $50,000. It's a credit for an unused portion of allowance. There was an allowance in that project that they didn't fully use. So the credit comes back to the district.
So the credit comes back to the district, yep. Number 25 is amending the IDEA. Number 6 is approving of professional development. Number 27 is going to be stricken. Number 28 is the this is the loop, correct? CME? Yeah, this is for the engineering to repave the roof, listen to me. Repave the driveway the loop at Hannon. And then number 29, again, is a standing item related to student services.
Jim, can you speak to 19 and 12? I think one was for clarifying the difference between the two tranches. If I'm not mistaken, one was for the new tranche and one was to authorize advertising for the one that was already done. I think it's 12 and 19.
Oh, yeah, 12's a long one, I see. Yeah, these are the resolutions that we have to pass. It's the first part of being able to refund the district's 2013 bonds. The board had also already authorized, I think that's what 19 is, had already authorized 2012 series bonds. So in order to be able to do them both at the same time, these were the two motions given to us by bond counsel to authorize the board to move a little bit more quickly if conditions merit that. It's apparently a 6-week process from start to finish that requires 2 board meetings and a public hearing. So in order to get the first part of the process out of the way, the start would be these 2 motions. And then Bond counsel was going to come to a presentation of Finance Committee in between to give a full debrief of the process and the potential savings for the district and impacts. And if the district chose not to move forward at that time, there's no obligation whatsoever with these two motions to move forward with the refi. It's just if the board decides to do that at a later date, this will allow them to move more quickly rather than try and schedule, you know, an impromptu meeting to pass the resolution.
Any other questions for Finance? Mr. Salmon.
What's number 7? Why are we going with Union County ESC for transportation?
So with, I'll answer that. So, yeah. With transportation, it's always good to have as many options as possible, given the shortage of bus drivers and providers. There are routes. So generally, I would recommend as many jointures and Ed Services Commission as you can authorize us to use is more helpful, so we can get routes for kids, because there's a shortage everywhere, and you tend to have to fill these routes quickly, and the more board-approved providers that you have access to, the better you can get these routes.
So can they, so like, you know, obviously we have busing contracts for general education in district and special education in district, and then we use Somerset County Ed Services for out-of-district special education in VOTEC. So how does this work? Like if we can't fill a route, we can, they can bid essentially on, like, if we have to go out to bid?
Right, yeah.
Okay,
If Somerset says, I've got no drivers, I can't do this particular route to this school, we could reach out to Union County and say, hey, are you able to fill this route? It just gives us another option. So, you know, we just passed a resolution to have access to as many as possible.
Got it, okay. And then I had a couple of questions on the discussion. So for the inventory, the capital asset inventory, so the idea is to go around, look at all the capital assets, tag them, get some data on them, and then put them into this asset management system. Do we have that? Do we know which asset management system we want to use?
Not yet. We're going to get at the next Facilities and Ops Committee. Mr. Rollo has done some initial investigation onto that, and he's come up with School Dude, or now Brightly. School Dude is a software that we already use in the district, so it's an additional module related to that. So we're going to look at that and determine the capabilities. Apparently, the software has been upgraded to cloud and has some more capabilities now going forward to possibly interact with the systems that we're already using. So we're going to start there.
So I assume we're going to purchase the asset management system before we go through the inventory process, so we know that the output from the inventory process is compatible with
the proposal that we're recommending is with School Dude, and they will actually do the upload and the population for us.
Oh, okay. So are they doing, School Dude is actually doing the walking around and doing the inventory, and then they're going to put it in their own system?
Yes.
And so for the ADA pathway, the estimate's $97,000 and change. We want to go out to, we want to have a contractor approved by June, but it says that we're reaching out to the town and the co-op. I guess that's like time and materials, like Mercer County or something like that, to avoid having to go to RFP for this work. Are we going to be able to do that before June?
I'll let Mr. Rollo answer that because he's spearheading it.
Yeah, so the first step is to get the engineering design done, and if depending on what that design looks like, what the specifications look like, we might be able to shop that to contractors on the co-op and say, can you complete this in the time frame, which would be one option to do it, and the other option would be to do a bid and have a bid opening, and just, you know, we're not sure which is going to turn up the fastest results. So, but step one, we have to get moving as the engineering spec. And
so is the engineers going to design a bid package for us, like as a
backup?
Yeah,
he would give us the bid specs, and then we could shop it through a contractor on the co-op or do a.
Can you do that in parallel? Can you go out to bid and shop to the co-op at the same time, or no?
You wouldn't necessarily look to do it in parallel. It would really depend, like when you have the spec, the availability of whether you're able to use the co-op will determine, because there's either an existing bid for that or not. And if it's more involved than what's in the co-op specification, you can't use it. So you have to go one or the other. So for example, if there's some sort of specific base prep work that's not on the co-op's pre-bid contracting solution, you can't use that. You have no choice. You'd have to go out and bid it. But you don't really know that until an engineer designs the bid specs, and then you know what your options are.
So how is the town involved in this? Like, what are we doing with vis-a-vis the town here?
The town has already hired contractors through their bidding process, which they can actually provide us use of through like a shared services arrangement. So basically, when these projects come up, we should be using the town as a resource to see if they already have the contracts available so that we can use their services and their contracts that have already gone out to bid and reduce the cost to the district of the bid process.
Well, so the town is just like another co-op then? I mean, they've gone out to bid, they don't know what they're bidding on, they're just time and materials, right, I guess?
Yeah.
Right, okay. And then the last question I had was, I think it was the paving project. Yeah. Okay, yeah, so for the William Allen Loop paving project, right, we're going out for the engineering bid, and then we're looking for community volunteers to donate their services for these types of projects going forward. So are we looking, what does that mean?
This was a general discussion on community volunteers and parents and contractors within the town to give them the opportunity to give back to the town and somehow donate their services if they have that specialty. So that was a more general conversation on volunteers for professional services within the district that could end up reducing the cost. Right now, we're going with the engineering specs, and I believe Mr. Rollo had mentioned that we were going to go out to the co-op to see what we had available to go forward with that.
So when you say like donate services, you mean just for professional services, not
Yes.
the actual labor? Like not the paving itself, it's the engineering design?
Yeah, no, we'd still have to pay for the materials, but if we could reduce the cost by the labor because some very patriotic citizen wants to come and donate back to the school district, we'd like to be able to do that.
Okay, so this is just a general thing you're looking into about how you could structure something like that, I guess?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Thanks.
Any other questions for finance? Any objections to removing items 5 and 27 from the list? Okay. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Salmon?
Yes.
Ms. White?
Yes.
Ms. Light?
Yes.
Ms. Hira?
Yes.
Ms. McCune?
Yes.
Mr. Molinari?
Yes.
Mr. Amin?
Yes.
Ms. Chipak?
Yes.
And Mr. Rashio?
Yes.
Okay, that will bring us to Personnel Committee report. There are 20 items. Can I have a motion? 22 items. Can I have a motion, please? Ms. White, Mr. Salmon, Personnel.
I asked Mr. Syed to read out the minutes, please.
Sure. So I can report out from the April 13th Personnel Committee meeting what I can report out. The first item was a discussion on the administrative review. We discussed initial data that we collected, the administration collected regarding administrative structure and the cost at comparable districts. And the districts that we were looking at were districts of 3,500 or more students, K-12, with similar demographics. The team agreed to use information from about 20 representative districts to inform the admin structure discussion and costs. Some of the follow-ups from that meeting, which the board has since been provided with, was to get information about assistant principals at the elementary schools, middle and high schools, along with other admin support information. And I was to provide administrative structure comparison at the Bernards Township School District from 2013-14 to the present day. And the administrative team up here, Nick, Kristen, myself, and Megan Toolin and Jessica Frank, shout out to them, helped us collect this information, and we did provide that to the Board of Education. I know Nick set that out in weekly notes. The next item I can't report out. The third item we'll talk about, we talked about the athletic director hiring update. There is an update that we'll talk about once we hopefully pass that item. The next item we talked about was non-aligned contracts. These are the staff in the Board of Education office, the support staff, also the IT folks. We talked about a proposed increase that was around the 3% range. This does not include the 2 assistant superintendents or the business administrator. Contract terms for those folks will be proposed in May. The next item we talked about was extracurricular discussion and criteria. We provided a listing of the Ridge clubs and also the activity club handbook that I know Dr. Lazovic and his team put together over the last year. We discussed criteria for clubs to be formed, and we also briefly discussed the world language clubs. Finally, we discussed vacant positions, which is a standing item on the agenda. And the next Personnel Committee meeting is, I believe, we didn't have it on the agenda. I think it's May 19th. That's it. Yep.
Okay, questions or discussion for personnel? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Salmon?
Yes.
Ms. White?
Yes.
Ms. Light?
Yes.
Ms. Hira?
Yes.
Ms. McCune?
Yes.
Mr. Molinari?
Yes.
Mr. Amin?
Yes.
Ms. Chipak?
Yes.
And Mr. Rashio?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, that's going to bring us to the Policy Committee report. Oh, did you want to say something, Nick? Oh, I'm sorry.
I asked Sean to share some great news for the public.
Right, so with that, item number 10, we just approved the athletic director for the 23-24 school year. His name is Livio Michael Mancino. He joins us tonight. I just wanted to give you a quick background on Mr. Mancino. He comes to us from Ramapo, Indian Hill School District, and Ramapo High School, where he was the assistant principal for several years, and then most recently is the athletic director there. Prior to that, he was also a math teacher for many years in Clark. And so I know we're very excited. We're planning to have him in a few days this year to work with Rich for a nice transition period. And I just want to say congratulations to Mr. Mancino.
Okay, and that will bring us to the Policy Committee report. There are 2 items under policy. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Salmon, Ms. McCune? Policy Committee.
We have not met since the last committee report. These are the same policies that I discussed last time for first reading that we went over, and then the one for second reading has not changed, obviously, since first reading.
Questions or discussion for policy? Mr. Amin.
So on the second reading for the adoption of textbooks, I wasn't at the meeting, but I made my concerns known afterwards that the stipulation of not requiring board approval for textbooks that are less than 5 years old without substantive changes, I said should still go through board approval, so I'm not going to vote for that policy revision.
Mr. Rashio.
Why would we need new textbooks that don't have substantive changes and are less than 5 years old? Do we have examples?
One example at the committee was, or I guess that curriculum was, if we need more books because more kids sign up for a class, and we say we got books 4 years ago for a class, and now tons of kids want to take it, and they want to get more of them, but the book has been slightly modified, and you know what I mean, since we purchased it the first time. So this policy would be if there was not substantive changes, it wouldn't need to go through the whole process, and if there was substantive changes, then it would go through the whole process. Is that correct, Kristen?
Yeah, it's basically correct. First of all, it would very rarely ever happen, if at all. And secondly, that would still go through the committee, where I would certainly explain why we were saying this fell into that criteria. And then the committee could certainly say, well, we'd rather have it voted on. Does that make sense?
What is the criteria for substantive changes?
Well, it is a bit of a subjective call. And that's why it would go through the committee, right? We would.
And that's my concern.
Of course,
Yeah,
but
my
that's why the
concern as
committee
well.
would review it.
And I think because it comes up so rarely, it's just easier for it to go through normal process rather than have an argument later whether it was substantive or not.
Yep.
As she said, it
really
very
don't-
rarely happens, and very rarely do we need it on an emergency basis.
There's really no objection to that. We were simply looking for some efficiencies. That's all.
So I'm scrolling through the report. Mr. Kuhn, which the textbook approval, that's falling under item number 1 or item number 2? 2?
2.
Second reading.
Second reading.
Is that the only thing?
No,
It's the only thing in item 2.
that's the only item on it? That's the only
That's
thing?
the only policy in item 2.
Okay.
Is this also part of like the supplemental materials? No, that was something different, right?
Call the roll, please.
Mr. Salmon?
So this is for item 1 or item 2 or both?
It's for both. What board members could do, if they wish to vote, for instance, yes on item 1, they could just clarify yes on item 1, no on item 2.
Did you discuss just sending number 2 back to the committee, or do we have to vote no on it and then try to send it back to the committee and then rewrite it and then re-vote on it?
I think a no vote would send it back to be discussed in committee.
Okay.
Yeah, if
So
it doesn't pass, we'll just take it back to committee.
Yeah, okay, so I'm yes on 1, no on 2.
Okay. Ms. White?
Yes.
On both? Okay. Ms. Light?
Yes on 1, no on 2.
Ms. Hira?
Yes on both.
Ms. McCune?
Yes on both.
Mr. Molinari?
Yes on 1, no on 2.
Mr. Amin?
Yes on 1, no on 2.
Ms. Chipak?
Yes on 1, no on 2.
And Mr. Rashio?
No on 1, yes on, sorry, other way. Yes on 1, no on 2. Dyslexia.
So 1 passed and 2 didn't.
Okay. So 1 passes and 2 does not. Anything else for policy? Okay, moving on to curriculum. There is 1 item under curriculum. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Salmon, Ms. Light, Curriculum Committee report.
Okay, so curriculum met on April 6th. The first item was the sociology textbook recommendation. There's a link in the minutes to the recommendation form that's submitted by Mr. Terry, the social studies supervisor, which includes the list of the other books reviewed and the cost of the recommended book, which is The Real World, which is currently being used in sociology courses in Bridgewater, Raritan, Livingston, and Ridgewood. Ms. Fox said that 1 parent came in to review the book but did not ask any questions about the book. Some board members did not support the book, citing concerns around race, gender, and feeling that the book did not offer balanced perspectives. And I will provide another report, separate report on that in a minute. Given time limitations of the committee meeting, Ms. Fox asked the committee members to write down all of their concerns so she and Mr. Terry could review them. The administration provided a Q&A for the board in time for this meeting that everybody had a chance to review, and I'll read that separately. The second item under textbooks was a world language textbook recommendation. Ms. Stotler proposed a staged textbook purchasing plan for Spanish and French, which fits within her textbook budget. No member of the public reviewed any of the proposed textbooks, and the committee supports this recommendation. The next textbook was an AP Lang textbook, language textbook. There were no further questions from the committee, and no member of the public came to review the book. The committee supports this recommendation. Items to put on report under progress. The grade 7 social studies textbook recommendation. About 10 years ago, grade 7 social studies was changed from a map skills focus to include broader global issues. On July 23rd, 2021, Governor Murphy signed Laura Wooten's law, which requires at least 1 semester specifically in civics or United States government as part of the social studies credit requirement during middle school. During the summer of 2022, the staff identified grade 7 as the best time for implementation of Laura Wooten's law and rewrote the curriculum for grade 7 social studies. The textbook being used in grade 7 social studies this year, We the People, was a supplemental resource and did not align with the new civics-based curriculum. The book being recommended by the staff for grade 7 social studies is Exploring Civics and Economics by Boehm et al., published by McGraw-Hill. The teachers preferred this book because it is appropriate for middle school students, presents issues in a balanced manner, and provides some globally related content. The online version includes an adjustable reading level feature for students with different abilities. A physical copy is available in the board office for review, and board members receive electronic access. The second was an ethics textbook recommendation. Ethics is a semester elective at Ridge for juniors and seniors. The course was introduced approximately 10 years ago for students to think about ethics in the context of academic integrity. Next year, an honors option will be available that will run concurrently with the CP option. Teachers are revamping the curriculum this summer to construct the honors component of the course. The teachers are requesting a textbook that is appropriate for both honors and CP students, and that includes application of different philosophical views and theories to modern-day examples. Supplemental materials are currently being used. While the recommended book, Doing Ethics, Moral Reasoning, Theory, and Contemporary Issues by Vaughan is a college-level text, the teachers believe it is accessible for students in the course. The recommended book is being used in Hopewell Valley, at TCNJ, Mercer County Community College, and Bergen County Community College. Mr. Terry is getting access for electronic access for board members, and a physical copy is in the board office for public review. There was scheduled to be the part of the post-secondary report, but that was tabled to the next meeting so Ms. Smith could present it with Ms. Fox. There was a discussion on CBAP data collection in the CBAP classrooms for individual students, or about, no individual students were discussed, but just the data collection about students was discussed. Ms. O'Connell and Dr. Reed were asked to explain how instructional and assessment data is collected in CBAP classrooms. Ms. Reed said that the goal of data collection has helped us to demonstrate meaningful, quote-unquote, meaningful progress for assessing efficacy of instruction design and implementation. Meaningful progress is measured at an individual, unique level for each CBAP student. She gave an example, a skill, for example, matching the word dog with a picture of a dog is part of a skill acquisition program, which is required by the ABA, or Applied Behavior Analysis program. It breaks down skills into small, isolated parts. When a staff member is teaching a skill, a token board, which is a physical board with magnetic tokens on it, is used along with audible positive reinforcement to show a student that he or she completed the skill and/or appropriately responded to an instructional prompt. Tokens can be used for rewards / extra breaks throughout the day. 1 or 2 days per week, the staff member will probe or test the student on the skill without prompting from the staff member to guide the student to the correct answer. The staff member records the student's score, for example, responded correctly to 7 out of 10 prompts on paper, and then typically in the morning before students arrive, enters the data into an ABA software program that converts the data into a graphical representation, because graphical measurement of progress is the foundation of ABA instruction. Based on the student's progress, the teacher will adjust the content of the student's skill acquisition programs for the following week. Given the large amount of data being collected, the frequency of collection, and the current manual nature of this process, the committee inquired about whether using an electronic resource, for example, an iPad, would reduce the need for the staff member to collect the probing data manually and then re-input it into the software. Dr. Reed and Ms. O'Connell said they would speak with staff about a pilot program. There was a question about the summer curriculum projects. There's a link provided in the minutes to all of the summer curriculum projects happening this summer. When summer curriculum projects are determined, the projects get posted and teachers can apply in May and June. Supervisors select teachers for each project. One board member requested to have a BT Connect meeting so that the public could provide input on the summer projects. Ms. Fox explained that all summer curriculum projects and staff are assigned are put on a board agenda for approval for the meeting in June. There was a discussion about program evaluation surveys for the 22-23 school year. Via Google form, Ms. Fox explained that 4 content areas are being surveyed to parents this spring: K through 12 counseling, 6 through 8 ELA, 9 through 12 social studies, and 6 through 12 mathematics. The program evaluation is done over 2 years. In summer of year 1, for example, staff members conduct research about the course and formulate surveys for students, parents, and staff. And in summer of year 2, staff members review survey results and make recommendations for changes or updates to the curriculum. Parents will get the survey that applies to their students for this year. The next discussion item was the health curriculum board resolution to direct the curriculum committee to explore all potential ways to deliver instruction related to the 2020 health standards. The committee reviewed the second draft of the parent survey, which would go out through Genesis. Based on the committee feedback from the previous meeting, Ms. Fox presented an updated version of the kindergarten parent survey. There will be 1 parent survey per grade, and the surveys will go to parents through Genesis. So through the Genesis parent survey, parents will only be responding on behalf of their student about their experiences this year. Middle and high school students are being surveyed currently. There will also be a community survey, and Mr. Markarian will communicate through various means when the parent surveys are released. Each survey will ask parents about whether they utilize the opt-out process and some questions around that. The parent survey will also ask parents to identify New Jersey health standards that they feel are objectionable. Separately, the parent survey will ask parents to identify portions of the curriculum that they feel are objectionable. The committee agreed that all standards for a grade band should be included in the surveys for the relevant grades. For example, for the parent surveys of grades K1 and 2, all of the K through 2 New Jersey health standards will be on the surveys, not just the standards identified by some board members. The committee did not have any other questions or concerns about the survey presented by Ms. Fox. Ms. Fox requested to bring 4 teachers to the next curriculum committee meeting, a 2nd grade teacher, a 5th grade teacher, and 2 Whams teachers to review to the board members how lessons are taught for the standards identified by the board for reconsideration. There was an update to student opt-out numbers. There are 35 students who opted out of health instruction this year. 3 of those opt-outs were not related to family life or sexuality. One board member did ask about the book Unwind being used in 9th grade English. Mr. Hunter will come to the next meeting to discuss the book. That was it for the minutes of the meeting. And then the Q&A for the sociology textbook. Question number 1, a board member felt that the book is anti-man, anti-white, and anti-American. For example, on page 60, 2nd column, 2nd paragraph, the book states, "For many years, scientific reality consisted only of the experience of white European males, and the realities of women, ethnic minorities, and other marginalized groups were categorically ignored or dismissed." This board member noted that the book did not identify inventions by other races. For example, algebra is Arabic. There were inventions by the Chinese in the 1st century, and the circadian rhythm was discovered in China in the 15th century. The administration responded to the question. This paragraph noted by the board member is found in Chapter 2, which is entitled Studying Social Life, Sociological Research Methods. The chapter outlines the evolution of the field of sociology and how it has evolved. First, it outlines different research methods in the field and then moves into issues in sociology. This paragraph is in the section on objectivity, and it does not mention history as being written by white men. Rather, it refers to scientific research as having been conducted by white European men for quote-unquote many years, and does so within the context of a paragraph on sociological research. There's a quote in here from the book. It says, "Some quote-unquote facts that sociologists once took to be objective reality have since been invalidated. Racist, sexist, and ethnocentric perspectives long dominated the field and passed for quote-unquote truth. For many years, scientific reality consisted only of the experience of white European males, and the realities of the experience of white European males and the realities of women, ethnic minorities, and other marginalized groups were categorically marginalized. The authors of the textbook are actually stating that the field has evolved away from that to be more broad and diverse. The criticism that the entire book is anti-man, anti-white, and anti-American is objectionable because it is in fact speaking to how the field has become more inclusive and diverse." The administration asked if there's any other examples. Another board member felt that the book's description of Antifa and the shooting of Michael Brown was unbalanced because there's no reference to Antifa's involvement in the 2020 riots, and the book portrays the shooting of Michael Brown as a police shooting of an unarmed African-American teenager, and no reference is made in the text to the fact that this was a 6-foot-tall, 200-pound teenager attempting to wrestle the gun away from a police officer. The administration said that Antifa is discussed on page 84. This section describes extreme methods of protest and is explained alongside QAnon. They are both presented as extreme, and neither is presented as the approach. Both groups presented together can be considered balanced as 2 different types of extreme groups. Michael Brown is discussed in a few places in the textbook. On page 217, the textbook uses the findings of the US DOJ report from 2015, issued in response to the killing of Michael Brown, to support its use of this as an example of institutional discrimination. Michael Brown is also referenced on page 452 to 454 in a chapter introduction on quote-unquote social change, in which the textbook authors make an argument about a systemic history of racism and racist policing in the US. On page 462, Michael Brown's death is described as an early motivating factor for the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement. In this section, the actions and activities of Black Lives Matter are described, and that not all members of the public agree with their, quote, strategies and demands, unquote. The textbook offers Black Lives Matter as an example of a progressive social movement in that it pushes for forward-looking social change as contrasted with regressive social movements that resist social changes, offering white supremacist organizations as examples of regressive social movements. While the textbook does not provide details of the Michael Brown killing that would support another perspective that would suggest that Brown was troubled or resisting arrest, this is a good example of where the instruction and dialogue on this subject, where the goal is for the students to think critically and reach their own conclusions based on a deeper analysis of multiple perspectives. The last question, this was not discussed at the minutes, but was submitted by a board member. The board member felt that the book is, the board member said he, read the entire thing, and it's full of incorrect quote-unquote facts. The politics section reads like an opinion piece, and it references non-scientific studies from places like the ACLU. I can cite many examples and would be happy to if it comes up for a vote. I've had no problem with this book if it actually presented balanced arguments and relied on studies that actually followed scientific methods. Sociology is still a science, right? The administration said there are multiple methods of research used in sociology beyond the scientific method. Sociology also uses observation, interviews, and surveys, as well as ethnographic studies and source review as the basis for their research. Any sociology textbook will reference studies utilizing these other methods. We disagree that the ACLU studies would be considered non-scientific, but would also note that the textbook references studies by other sources. In Chapter 10, there's a section titled, What is Politics? The only instance in which a study by the ACLU is cited in this section of the textbook is on page 278, in which the authors of the textbook state, minorities, the elderly, and low-income Americans are disproportionately affected by voter ID laws. The authors of the textbook cite 3 sources in addition to the ACLU study to support this claim. The first is an unpublished manuscript on file with Harvard Law School Library and was the basis for an article eventually published by the University of Chicago Press in 2022. The second is a report prepared by professors at University of Michigan, University of Pennsylvania, and Harvard University and Yale Law School for the 2018 Election Sciences Reform and Administration Conference. The third is published in the Journal of Empirical Legal Studies, which is published by the Cornell Law School. Also, the ALU fact sheet on voter ID laws that is referenced by the textbook authors includes footnotes of its own for every fact or statistic provided. On this fact sheet, the ACLU cites sources such as the Brennan Center for Justice, a report published by the Harvard Law School, the U.S. Government Accountability Office, a working paper from an MIT scholar, the Iowa State Association of County Auditors, and journalistic reports from the Washington Post and Texas Tribune. And then the administration asked if there was any other examples. That's it.
Questions or discussion? Ms. White.
I have a lot to say, so I just want to make sure that I have a clear understanding, because I was involved in the first initial curriculum meeting. So going back, we were presented with a textbook, and we first discussed the reasoning for that, and my understanding was that it was selected by a team of teachers who were charged with picking out a textbook that would be accessible to all learners, and that since the textbook the course was using was from, I think, 2014 and not up to date, that Mrs. O'Connell, the director of special services, had said this is an opportunity for you to find a textbook that could be accessible to students who have IEPs and 504s and are struggling learners. And it would be an opportunity to find another way to offer social study electives to these students that they don't currently have. So when the first book was chosen, it fit that criteria, and board members had issues with it. And so Mr. Terry went back to the team of teachers who now in their own time, as opposed to the summer, came up with a second book, this book that now Mr. Salmon has discussed, that also met the criteria of prioritizing the fact that the book would be accessible to all learners. And it met all the other criteria. So then I guess you had another curriculum meeting, and this one that I wasn't at. And again, based on these questions, some board members have taken some issues with some of the topics that are being discussed. Rather than looking at these topics as opportunities for students to engage in debate and critical thinking and research on different points of view, with teachers helping to navigate them through thoughtful conversation. And to me, this demonstrates a lack of trust in our educators and a profound lack of understanding of educational pedagogy. So I'm not sure what the next move is going to be, but I just want to say, by not first approving the first textbook and potentially not approving the second textbook, what essentially we're doing is we're not providing the need to offer opportunities to our struggling learners to take an elective, which was one of the primary goals in the search for the textbook. And I would think parents who have struggling learners might be really upset about this. And I also think by doing this, we're not prioritizing the need to prioritize the rights of all students to have textbooks selected by educators, to have the right to have this textbook by a certified, educated, specific to content area educator. And you're actually not prioritizing the right to give parents the right to have their own parental voice, because you're saying your voice represents everybody else. This elective is not a required course. It's an elective that parents can choose to say, I don't like that textbook. I'm going to recommend my child not take it. But you're taking the right away from myself and any other parent who doesn't have an issue to have a textbook that has been vetted by our dedicated experts. I wouldn't presume to tell a dentist how to do a root canal, and I wouldn't presume to tell my electrician how to rewire my house. So I'm not going to presume, and I am an educator, but an elementary school one, not a high school one. But I'm not going to presume to tell our expert educators how to do their job. I'm glad that there is a process where anybody can come and look at textbooks. I know that one or two did come. But I don't think our asking all of these questions and then saying, I don't like this or I don't like that, should override the decisions that the teachers and the supervisors and the assistant superintendent of curriculum has recommended. And quite frankly, I think it's insulting to the teachers that we are doing that, and I'd like to really apologize to you because you're professionals, and your recommendations should be trusted and valued. And that doesn't mean parents can't ask questions, but it does mean that your voice in something that is specific to your expertise should carry weight.
Mr. Salmon. Go ahead.
Oh.
It's on.
Yeah, it's still on. I guess I could go now. So somebody asked about how textbooks are approved. Like the board does have a textbook like approval policy, but kind of the general mechanics of how it works is that the staff member that wants a new textbook would propose it to their supervisor. In this case, a sociology teacher said, listen, we're running sociology as a junior and senior elective concurrently. So it's a honors course and a CP course. There are students with IEPs in the course, so we really need to make this accessible to more folks, like Ms. White said. So they come and say, we need a new textbook for this. There's a textbook approval form where the supervisor lays out, and or the staff member if they're at the curriculum committee meeting, here's why we need it, here's all the options we considered, and then here's our recommendation. So on the textbook approval form, for this specific book, there's 5 other textbooks, and for each textbook, there's some indication of why that book was not selected as a recommendation. So for example, there's a book, Giddens' Introduction to Sociology, and the comment was it's too, quote unquote, college level of a read by far, and physical copies are only available in paperback. So that's why this one was not chosen as the recommended book. So like Ms. White said, the sociology teachers liked this book, The Real World. They noted that it was being used in Ridgewood, which is, I think people would say, is a peer district in their sociology courses. And they gave the book to the other sociology teachers, and then the teachers actually give it to some students as kind of like a test drive of the book to see what those students think. So that's why it's a really good way to see if the students are engaged with it and it is accessible for them, especially in a course that's run concurrently like sociology. So that's exactly what happened here. There were concerns probably presented by board members to both recommendations by Mr. Terry, the social studies supervisor. Ms. Fox did say, listen, you can still approve the book and then hand those concerns over to the teachers that write the curriculum over the summer, and they'll make a note that if we discuss the Michael Brown shooting or Antifa sections, we'll have these notes, just the same way they would have it for any public member that came in and talked to Mrs. Fox or read the book and provided some indication of, subject matter that they thought was uncomfortable or something like that. And that is taken into an account, as some factor when the curriculum is written, but it's still approving the textbook and allowing the teachers to go forward and fulfill their criteria for making the course accessible and workable for the students, and also for the students that did the work to say, okay, these will be good for the next kids coming into sociology. So that's the process. That happens with every book. That happened with the accounting textbook that we approved. That's happened with the world language the AP language textbook we're going to approve, the world language textbooks that we approved, same process. So I don't know why this book is really any different other than, again, it's the same process. So like, there's no objection to the French textbook. Nobody's like reading that and saying, oh, I object to that because I know more than a French teacher or I feel uncomfortable. It's the same process, so I don't understand certainly if you have a concern, then the concern is noted and it's given to the teachers for summer curriculum, but it shouldn't hold up approval of the textbook. And like Ms. White said, if we don't approve this textbook, I don't know what we're telling the teachers. Like there's no next step here as far as I can tell. They just still use the outdated, inaccessible book that people couldn't really use, and that's still in the class. I don't know. Teachers can use supplemental materials, I guess, and kind of cobble together what they would have done otherwise. So I'm not sure, for folks that might vote against this, vote to reject the recommendation of the teachers and the students, I'm not sure what their next idea is.
Mr. Rascher.
Okay, a couple of things. So I'm not a cop, but I can recognize a murder when I see one, right? So I'm not a teacher, but I could recognize an opinion piece, an unscientific book when I see it. Now, the fact that you have to even explain or justify that the book is leaving out key components of the Michael Brown story, to me is grounds for dismissal immediately. It's not presenting both sides. It is presenting the facts that it wants to. With reference to the studies, the Washington Post editorial is hardly qualifies as a beacon of scientific knowledge. These are not peer-reviewed studies. They're working papers. It's almost laughable that someone used them in the manner in which this textbook did. Specifically, in these studies, the studies references, like the University of Chicago study, the authors do not actually estimate key quantities of interest. The analysis is it uncritically combines election results from different elections when it pertains to the ID laws. Now, if you counter all these studies that this book references with actual data, right, from the US Census Bureau, which we all agree is probably pretty official, the election survey on voter turnout in 2020, so this book, just so everybody knows, this book makes a claim that there's voter ID laws unequivocally affect disenfranchised communities, right? Unequivocally suppresses minority votes. I mean, that's the way the book presents itself. Not some think this and some studies show this, it does, right? So it presents it as facts. So let's go to the Census Bureau, right? The election survey voter turnout in 2020, the presidential election is worth noting because it clearly demonstrates there has been no wave of voter suppression, keeping American voters from registering and voting. Instead, the Census Bureau reported that the turnout in 2020 at 66.8% was the highest voter turnout of the 21st century, just short of the record turnout of 67.7% voting age citizens in 1992. This was higher than any election, including Obama's election. Official census data shows that there was a higher turnout among all races in 2020 compared to the 2016 election. Black citizens turned out at 62.6% compared to only 59.4% the previous election. Asian Americans turned out at 59.7% in 2020, and almost 11% increase from 2016. All right? So then, let's get to the opinion piece. The opinion piece says the big lie, right, is a term with regards to the 2020 election, right? It says specifically, research shows that election fraud is vanishingly rare, and when it does occur, it is often perpetuated by Republicans. And it cites a study from 2020, which is interesting because none of the data was available in 2020. It's citing opinion pieces from 2020. How can you have a definitive, textbook-worthy fact from a 2020 election on a study done in 2020? The election was November of 2020, right? So I don't understand. All right, so then it makes another statement. What does it say? It says something about the Georgia voting laws. it said, voting laws like Georgia suppress the black vote, suppress minority votes, okay? When in fact, what it didn't look at, and all it took was a little bit of research, right? Georgia voting law comment was made with no reference to any official data to back it up. Again, according to the Census Bureau, not only did voter turnout not go down, but the turnout of all voters, including black and Hispanic voters, went up dramatically in the election compared to 2004 presidential election. All right, so what's the reason for pushing this textbook that is clearly fraught with opinion? It's not our job to bring a textbook that is, we're not preventing kids from getting textbooks. You're not giving us books that are worthy of approval. It's plain and simple. I make a motion that we just vote.
You think Ridgewood also agrees that this book and the publisher, Norton, who is like one of the biggest textbook publishers in the world, agrees with that? That they're publishing, like, what, blatantly false information?
It's opinions. Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't care. I mean, look.
What's wrong with some dialogue, though?
With
right?
what?
What's wrong with some dialogue?
No. I agree.
No,
dialogue
not
is great.
amongst us.
Let's keep order. Let's keep order.
If this book was balanced and it said, some believe that voter suppression occurs and others don't. Some studies show this and some studies show that. That would be one thing. That's what the ethics book does, right? I started reading the ethics book. The ethics book actually says climate change, blah, blah, blah. But some feel that this happens. Where do you stand? This book is just a straight-on opinion piece. It's trash, for lack of a better term.
Ms. Chibik.
I would like to give 2 comments. Accessibility or a book having a hardcover does not override the need to give the students a balanced book that is not misleading or factually wrong. The second one, that it is not true that this is the only book that we looked into it. I personally looked into the AP European History, and that book was a balanced one. I liked it and supported to have it. Thank you.
Petra.
In my experience at Ridge and at the middle school, I haven't found myself reading the entire textbook in most instances. And my teachers will, instead of just having us read textbook pages, they'll have us read like supplemental sources. So if we're learning about one perspective, we'll get 3 or 4 more. So like, such as in my European history class, my teacher will provide additional sources in combination with whatever is in the textbook, because the textbook will have someone's opinion in it because it is a piece of writing. Everyone has opinion in their writing. And I find that, like, I think continuing to wait on this topic and possibly preventing students from having the accessible book next year is going to do more detriment than approving a textbook that is not always agreeable, because the teacher will come up with alternative sources that provide different perspectives rather than just the textbook's perspective or their own perspective or that of their peers.
Second motion to vote.
We're going to let everybody have a say first, and then we'll move it.
I like what you just said. So I taught sociology for a number of years, and I had like a collection of intro to sociology textbooks in my office because that was before the internet, and the vendors would bring them and dump them there. And I'll admit, the quality of them is not always the best. It's not a big moneymaker for the publishing industry like some fields, okay? So sometimes when they update a version of it, they are a little sloppy, and it's true. Like my students used to point that out when I taught it at different colleges. So there are issues with every textbook. You're gonna find, some section isn't as well written, or maybe you feel like it's somebody's opinion. I feel like the students, this is an upper level elective class at Ridge. The students are smart enough to understand. They are familiar with most of these topics that you're bringing up. They've read about it and they've heard it on the news. I totally trust that the conversations in class will be facilitated by the teachers. And if they don't like part of the textbook, they're not using the whole book. I mean, it's kind of like a resource. It has lots of, like the book when I looked through it, is a lot more interesting than some of the boring, college, the higher level college books. There's lots of pictures and charts and things in there to catch your attention. It's really something to use as an overall resource to kind of go through, to get familiar with the topic, to get you interested in the topic. It's not the only thing that's being discussed or the only thing that's being taught. So I don't have any concern with the fact that there might be, sections of the textbook that are a bit outdated or not as well-written as they could have been. I think, what the goal is to make the book accessible and interesting to students, and it looks like that way to me when I look at it, based on a lot of the textbooks I've looked at.
So, oops, sorry. So we've been, we've been focused on, student wellness for quite some time. And in the diversity survey that we just recently had, if you read through 980 pages like I did, you will see multiple different comments that discuss how conservative students or students that identify and lean more Republican feel like they're ostracized in the school. What message are we sending our students when we read something like Larry just wrote, saying that all the big lie is perpetrated by Republicans? That does not send a good message to our conservative students or to our progressive students, because that is increasing the divide in this country. And it's also not helping with mental wellness and not offering up the ability to look at both sides of the story and to actually listen to the other side and hear what they have to say. So I think that this book, not only is it scientifically and factually, destitute, I really, really think that this would be doing a disservice to our school district and our students.
Mr. Amin.
For me, the issue isn't one bad article or one bad section. There seems to be prevalent throughout the book, so it wasn't a matter of one piece. But the bigger problem for me is the process, right? So the notion that because Ridgewood uses it, of course we should use it, or because the teacher selected it, we shouldn't exercise any judgment. I think a Board of Education is there exactly to exercise judgment. There shouldn't be any personal offense taken at it, and if a board member doesn't want to exercise personal judgment, I question their commitment to the role. But the process doesn't say the board gets to approve books except if Ridgewood approved it, or except if an expert within the staff picked it, because that should always be the case. But overall, the board should have some say in it, and with the various examples provided, it's not a one-off situation, and to me, it still hasn't been quite clear why other textbooks aren't being also suggested, or it seems to be, the world's falling apart. We've used this book without this board for the last 9 years. So if that means we use it for one more year with supplemental information or something, I don't think it's necessarily the end-all and be-all, but the process should require board approval, and the fact that that's being questioned, or the thought that that's the equivalent of banning books, to me that's the equivalent of the staff banning every other book that they haven't selected. So it's not a matter of banning books, it's a matter of the board exercising its judgment and its opinion after it's heard from the administration.
Let's give everybody who hasn't gone yet a chance. That would just be me. I'm gonna hop in, then I'll come back.
Okay.
Yeah, a few things here. As far as process, from the New Jersey School Board Association website, quote, "The board establishes what will be taught, when and where it will be taught, to whom it will be taught, and with what materials," end quote. That is our legal responsibility. It's our prerogative as a board, and frankly, it's our duty. And I consider it part of my duty to read and review any possible materials whenever possible before I approve them. When the final chapter of the book, Social Change, starts off, the United States is a nation built on racial injustice. Black people, indigenous people, and other people of color have been oppressed and exploited since the arrival of Europeans on the shores of the New World. The racism at our foundation manifests itself in many different ways, both in the structure of our society and its institutions and the interactions that make up our everyday lives. There's no quotations, there's no citations. That's the textbook's author's opinion. Now, we talked a little bit about the Michael Brown incident and how the textbook portrays that. If that was the only instance of one-sidedness in this textbook, I would approve it right now, just as Mr. Vascio talked about the ethics textbook. It's not. When they talk about QAnon and Antifa, they're supposedly both presented as extreme organizations. QAnon's presented in the book properly as an extremist conspiracy theorists who think Democrats are Satan-worshiping lunatics. A little bit of a paraphrase, but that's kind of what they go at. Antifa, on the other hand, is presented as a movement opposed to far-right ideologies such as authoritarianism, white nationalism, racism, sexism, and homophobia. There's no mention of its involvement in burning down police stations in Portland. There's no mention of its involvement in riots across the country, violence, murder. It's a very unbalanced presentation. And this is the insidious subtlety that this textbook tries to get away with. Another example, systemic racism is built into all of our country's structures and institutions because it was part of our founding principles. One of the founding principles that I read, and our Constitution has always been amenable, and we've come a long way with that, but this textbook portrays none of that. There's no references, no citations, it's just the author's opinion. In that same section, the author encourages students who want to learn more to read Ibram X. Kendi, perhaps the most well-known proponent of critical race theory in the country, a theory explicitly presented in a positive light in this book, and also a theory that our district has explicitly said we're not teaching. Listen, even that could be acceptable with a little bit of balance. Maybe direct students to Glenn Loury, Roland Fryer, John McWhorter. They're prominent African-American intellectuals from Brown, Harvard, and the New York Times, respectively. But no, the textbook does not do that. I go on, I mean, the text does, but this is not sociology. This is ideology. And I'm not going to vote for it. And furthermore, just to set expectations, I'm going to look at every single piece that I can that comes across my plate with the same type of critical eye. So those are my thoughts on the matter. Ms. White.
Just a couple things. One, I had no issue with the first textbook, but the reason we had to look at another textbook was because some people did have issues with it. Now, I took the textbooks home and I looked through them and I made a decision that I trust that the teachers know how to navigate these topics. I trust that our students are smart enough to ask questions and be charged with research. Go find me 3 other articles that show a different viewpoint than this. I think that's part of what we're asking them to do in these classes. But I mean, without even voting, I can tell you that this approval is not going to go through. So the question then is, well, what are we going to do next? Are we going back to saying, okay, we're going to get a textbook that has already been deemed inaccessible to our struggling learners, is not engaging to our students? The students themselves have said that. Is that, you know, I think we need to know, where are we going next with this? And at last, I agree, it is our job to look and ask questions. But I also think that we are wasting our educators' time if we are going to ask them to do summer work and spend hours looking through textbooks and researching and putting curriculum together, and then when they come to us and they say, here is, and they do, they have a rubric that they follow, and they check off, it does, you know, does the book talk, you know, is it not biased on all these different things? Does it touch on this? Does it touch on that? What's the readability? So when they come to us and they present their findings, if we're just going to say, thank you very much, but we don't agree, and now we're going to start all over again, then why are we even asking them to do that? I think it's a misuse of their time. It's a misuse of our time. I think it's overreaching. I'm not going to say it's banning books, because you're not saying that we can't have a sociology book. What is the end game here? Are we just saying we're not going to prioritize the fact that the kids who might be struggling learners can't take this course? Because if that's what it is, then say it. Say, guess what? We want the original textbook. It's not good, but it doesn't have these different things that are controversial, and no kid who's a struggling learner will be able to take this course because they don't have the support there. But if that's where we're going, own it, say it, and let's move on.
So how does this book support struggling learners specifically?
It's more accessible, they're able to read it. And actually, this came up in our curriculum meeting. Mrs. O'Connell talked about the fact that in these courses, you don't have, there's no second teacher that's helping the students to read the books, understand them, do the assignments. They're on their own. Okay. So, for instance, the first one was very readable. It was not a college-level textbook. It was a high school level, and that was the other thing that they were charged with. Find us a high school-level textbook that can be used. So that was what they did. So the next one that they came up with was they said it's not as easily accessible to our struggling learners, but they can do it. They can do it without support. And a question was actually asked, well, why can't we just, have somebody help them? And Mrs. O'Connell said, but that defeats the whole point of them being able to be in these classes and handle this on their own and not feel different and not be treated differently. And that they, if you make the course appropriate for all, then they can do it on their own. And that's what the parents have been saying that their kids are missing out on. So just know, if you decide to go back to the original textbook, but the 2020 version, then that whole criteria that was asked of us to do is being eliminated. And that's what I said. If you're okay with that, then just say it. But that's the harsh reality, because there are not a lot of textbooks that are accessible to all readers. There just aren't.
If the textbook is a supplement to the course, then another textbook can be used. Frankly, the accessibility of this textbook, because it's accessible to students of different levels, is a bug, not a feature. Because I don't want this type of textbook in their hands either. So yeah, I'm going to come right out and say that. I don't think that's not a convincing argument.
Plus, one of the things you brought up, Ms. White, is that, they go through a rubric to check off that it's unbiased. I don't understand how every example is unbiased. It clearly shows a bias.
I don't know if you want to address the different, it has to do with there were 5 things listed about gender and they go through all.
Specific to
Right.
certain groups and how they're treated within a book, that piece.
Right. Right. I was just trying to point out that whatever textbook, they have specific rubrics that they're using. So they were given a rubric that was attached to the approval form that we could see. And it's the same thing for every course. And they were asked, I'll say it again, the main priority was we wanted to have students have an opportunity to take an elective. So just know, by not picking the books that the teachers have recommended that they say any student can handle, you are eliminating that. And if you want to go back to the original textbook because you think that the book that they said was unengaging, difficult to read for any student, if that's what you want, just let's not keep debating this over and over. There's so many other issues.
So let's vote.
Do we have any objections to calling the question?
I just have one more comment. I will support that because I would rather give our kids an unbiased look to help them critically think rather than cramming biased garbage down their throats so that they don't.
But they can't even get to it. There's no even opportunity to take the concerns and have the teachers say, okay, we heard this from board members or parents or whoever else read the book. That's the whole point of the textbook adoption policy, to get any concerns that we have. One parent came in and read this and didn't even ask a question, right? So but the point is to make it accessible, the book available to everybody, to raise those concerns. And if there's something in the book, like the 1 or 2 studies that Larry cited, the 1 sentence that he cited, the 1 sentence that Sheila cited, okay, so you see something in there that you didn't like the depiction of. It's a sociology book with 350 pages. You found one thing that you didn't like. That's fine. Give that to the teachers and let them know that, but then give them the resources that they want to use to at least get a point across to the kids. You're talking about 17 and 18-year-old kids. I don't think this is anything new to them. So I think that it's just a balancing. On one side, you have sociology teachers, students, other schools like Ridgewood, that have used this book. Then on the other side, you have 4 or 5 lay people who have no background in sociology, no understanding of how to instruct in sociology, and have found one thing that they don't like the depiction of in the book. There's no credibility on that side.
It's a lot more than 1, buddy.
It's a lot more
Yeah, I know.
than
We
one,
just
and
heard those
we've said
tonight,
it.
Larry, for the first time.
That's
No.
in all the committee meetings.
All right.
Let's keep order.
Say that again.
You read out that there were objections.
Yeah, there was 1 objection.
Wait. One at a time. Ms. Hira had her light on.
Let
We're
him
not going to go
finish.
back and forth.
They just asked me a question.
Let him
not right now.
finish.
Ms. Hira.
Yeah, they just asked me a
I don't think
question.
he finished his thought.
Can I just
Let
answer the
Ms.
question?
Hira, then I would like to call the vote.
Okay. I was at the committee meetings. We went through the first textbook, Schaefer, 1 sentence. from Keith, something about this book being biased against women, one thing from Chilla about an old study. So what was the response from the administration? Both textbooks, the one we're currently using and the Schaefer book originally proposed, both said the same thing. Women have made steady but slow progress. That was never even discussed at the next curriculum committee meeting. The second part, the 1958 study about discrimination in hiring and housing practices. The objection was, this is a very old study. So Mr. Terry came back and said, actually, that is a foundational study in sociology about how sociologists define minority groups. That's why it's in the book, right? So where did we go with that? Nowhere. We just went on to the next book. There was no discussion about, oh, okay, well, we can just give our concerns to the teachers, have them note that, and we'll write the curriculum for the first book. 2 sentences in the whole book. Something about perceived bias against women, I think, I don't even know what the point was, and something about an old study, right? So like, but that's why this isn't on the level, because we didn't go back to that, right? So if there was concerns there, then we went on to the next book. And now we've heard Larry's concerns for the first time tonight, even though we could have had the administration address them, but this is the first opportunity we get to hear those, and some other concerns from Keith. And it's just, this discussion is not on the level. Like, nobody's talking about the AP English book. Did anybody read that?
Yes.
Yeah, you did?
Yeah, we started to.
Where's the insidious subtleties in that one?
I didn't.
No, right, exactly. So then,
Wait, have you ever read a book? Have you ever read one of these books?
No,
You
because
admittedly have never read a book.
I am not an AP English teacher. I am not a
Yeah,
sociologist.
but you're a board member who's been elected to oversee it.
But I am
You're the chairperson.
And you're the chairperson of the committee.
But I am not instructing the kids. I rely on the people that we pay that have certificates in this area to do it, and the kids who read it. Okay. I'm relying on them.
Okay.
I'm not relying on people with zero background, zero experience, who just feel that this book about a senior elective course is biased, but are reading 0 other textbooks.
Oh, that's not true. I started reading the ethics book, dude.
Yeah, did you read the Spanish book, the French book, the accounting book that you approved last time?
I didn't read I didn't do the math book either. I didn't do the math book either because there's not a lot of subjectivity in that crap.
How do you know? How do you know?
I'm shutting down and starting the conversation.
How do you know you
It's been
didn't read
cutting
it?
them back and forth. We're gonna go on to Ms. Hira, who's been waiting her turn very patiently, and then we're gonna call the question.
I'm
Ms.
truly
Hira.
enjoying this, actually. I think Tim actually sort of said at the end what I was about to say, which is that none of us are sociologists. We're not practicing teachers. They've made a recommendation, and the board, we constantly forget to hear. Like, we hear what they're saying. We hear what the student is saying. What is she saying? Give us the book. And then the teachers, they will navigate us through the subject matter. They can supplement, right? If there is a biased voice, then give the teacher the authority to offer the other opinion and for the students to engage in a dialogue. It's sociology. But we don't. It's not our job here to sit here and micromanage. We should review it, yes, I agree with you. But we gotta listen to the people who know best, right? Especially the students also who are saying, hey, look, this book isn't working. Give us something new. Something has been provided, it's been recommended, but what do? We review it, we find our critiques, and we're like, no good, move on to the next. Well, the question was asked, well, what's next then?
That's the point. Rip it down and give it to
Mr. Raw, I'd like to call the question.
Chilla has her light on.
Yes, I just wanted to add, it's never one sentence. The last time at the curriculum meeting, I has been stopped at the first example that I was bringing up, lack of time. So it's not just one sentence. After reading this book, the very many times used sentence, trust the teacher, gets to be a very loaded sentence.
Can you explain what you mean by a very loaded sentence? Because I would love for the teachers to hear that.
Yes, please read the book. Thank you.
Ms. Raw, can we call the question, please?
Okay.
And we can split up the 2 textbooks. There's just 2 under consideration. There's the AP English book and the sociology book.
Mr. Salmon.
Yes to both.
Ms. White.
Yes to both.
Ms. Light,
Yes to AP English, no for sociology.
Ms. Hira, Ms. McCune,
Yes to both.
Mr. Molinari,
Yes to AP English, no to sociology.
Mr. Amin,
Yes and no.
Ms. Chipak,
Yes on AP English and no on sociology.
and Mr. Rashio.
Yes and no.
AP English passes, sociology does not. Anything else for curriculum? Is there a wellness committee? Wellness committee report?
Can I say
Oh,
something?
yeah. Yes, Mr. McCann.
Okay. So, obviously, a spirited conversation about the real world and introduction to sociology. I just wanted to say that to answer the question that came up earlier from the public and to kind of piggyback something that Mr. Salmon was talking about, it is ultimately listed in our regulation that the new textbook proposal is submitted to the Board of Education for approval and added to the district's program. So we are following the procedure. Ultimately, the board has the authority and right to vote on the textbooks. We are following our policy to the letter on that regard. And I just wanted to say, you know, it's okay to disagree sometimes. And I know we have a lot of teachers sitting here tonight, and I have the privilege of working both with you and also with this board. And I just wanted to say that I know that this seems like a disappointment and maybe a frustration because people have worked on looking at a couple of different books, and we haven't gotten to a place where we found something that is more universally supported. But I don't take that to mean that you are not supported. You as teachers are supported. I know you shake your heads and you're frustrated, but I know this board is not sitting here looking for ways to not support teachers. And I believe that about all 9 of our board members, so thank you.
Thank you. Wellness committee.
Wellness is meeting later this week.
Facilities and operations.
Okay. All right, so work orders are still unacceptably high. The problem we're having is the quality and talent on the maintenance side is hard to find and retain at $21 to $25 an hour. We're considering reclassing the new maintenance hires as lead maintenance people to increase their pay scale. Another problem we're having is relying on Aramark for maintenance needs and staffing has been problematic, as they claim to be having trouble getting staff themselves. Proposal to have them send staff from other districts to assist us and or to subcontract out the work if necessary. The committee is prepared to bring in contracted staff and pass on all costs to Aramark needed to control the work orders. We're also talking about decentralizing maintenance workers to wherever the problems are. So if there's problems at Whams and we have extra people at Ridge, we'll send them over to Whams. We discussed, as Kristen Light said, leveraging local residents' expertise with either contract reviews or a third pair of eyes to make sure that we are getting the best quality work that we can get. We're still looking at DPW proposals for landscaping. It looks like Aramark is going to stay as our vendor of choice for lining the baseball fields just because the town certainly just doesn't have the capacity. We discussed fixing the divot, a very large divot in Lee Field track as soon as possible. There's a divot right on the outside of lane 6, and if that doesn't get fixed and starts to spread, we'll be unable to host track events, which actually can incur a significant financial burden to us. We started a new kind of section of the meeting called Heard on the Street, and it's a opportunity for us to, some of the committee members or anybody, to discuss rumors that are out there on the street. An example was, you know, rodent infestation in the snack shack. And it's just a way to ease, you know, to stop the rumor mill, for lack of a better word. We're talking about appealing to the state for more effective pest control methods and just simply putting a door sweep on the bottom of the door for the snack shack to prevent mice from getting in. A Whams teacher who was forced to teach in the gym because of an HVAC issue did return to his classroom on the day of the meeting. However, we learned that even after the duct cleaning, the odor was still occurring. So the HVAC unit is being completely torn down, and we're going to try to find the source of that problem so that the teacher can get back into his classroom. Girls softball field, fully operational, no reported issues even after this weekend's rain. Changes are being made to the path, the ADA, make it more ADA accessible. I was personally at a track meet and watched a student in a wheelchair trying to get up that incline, and the front wheels were literally coming off the ground. So that's a priority of ours. We discussed plans that are roughly that $97,000. We're going to be testing a new inventory and asset management system in the next few weeks. We need to get a handle on all the physical assets that we have that can be monitored and maintained electronically rather than how it's been done in the past. This is going to increase efficiency and reduce costs tremendously. And that's it.
Any questions for facilities? That's right.
Oh, I'm sorry, there's one more thing. We did discuss in pretty good detail triple busing in good detail. The committee is going to recommend bringing it to a full board for discussion and to the community for further consideration on the triple tier busing.
I just have a question because I know you said that the girls softball field is fully operational. And a couple of meetings back, you had mentioned.
Cedar Hill?
Yeah, is that off the table? Are we?
I don't think it's off the table. Certainly the way it's being done now on varsity field, the girls love it down there, but we are still going to move ahead with the Cedar Hill, even if it's for a JV field or something, because it's just a wasted space right now.
Yeah, I think the thought was the athletic director thought it'd be good to have that field and use the current field as backup or JV. And we can also improve the CHS field to be more at the varsity high school level, unlike maybe the current field.
But nothing's been done yet in terms of like looking at that area. Like, wouldn't we have to first find out whether that can even happen?
Well, yeah, Bill Larkin was looking at it. There's not a lot of structural changes that need to be done, so it's really just regrading and sodding the area. So there's not a big engineering lift on it. But I don't think it's going to be as extravagant as we initially had talked about with the big fences and the dugouts and everything like that, because it's not really going to house varsity. It's probably going to be more of a JV facility.
Any other questions? Mr. Salmon.
I thought that, I might be misremembering it, but I thought the town submitted like a proposal to line the ball fields, and that was the only part of the landscaping that they could do. Was I misremembering that?
Yeah, it was the other way.
They basically proposed that they might be able to take care of the athletic fields. When they were looking at the cost and the resources, there's a requirement for the town to be on site. And it's more of a time requirement and how they can't do that. So they're currently going out to bid for maintenance services, for lawn mowing and landscaping services. So they're going to look to see what they can do to reduce the cost of that for the district instead.
So is their bid including all of the school facilities?
Yeah, it will include, see what they can do for all of our school facilities. So that
including the fields.
Including the fields.
Oh, their bid package includes all of our fields and all of our grounds?
Just not lining them.
Just not lining the fields, like cutting the grass and stuff, like just maintaining like the outside. But
so when they said that
they won't be able to line them and
they said they could, but now they can't. So now they're going to put our fields and grounds and everything into their bid package to see what they come out with.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Anybody else? All right, moving on. Liaison committee reports. Anybody have one? All right, that will bring us to public comment on non-agenda items. Please come forward, 3 minutes, sign in, state your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Laura Reeder. I've been a member of the Social Studies Department at Bernards Township for 17 years, teaching AP Psychology among other humanities courses. In that time, I've educated, mentored, and guided thousands of students at Ridge. I've devoted countless hours of both my professional and personal time to the development of my skills in the classroom for the betterment of my students, the children of this community. This year, I returned to teaching a section of sociology, a course that concurrently instructs students at both CP and honors levels. Very soon into the school year, I recognized that the current textbook no longer fits the needs of the varied learning abilities of my students and recommended we investigate a new textbook for the course. My colleagues and myself spent hours reading through various samples, surveying students, and evaluating resources to identify the most appropriate text. I was thoroughly disheartened by the level of resistance and criticism received throughout this process. Our initial recommendation was called unbalanced, and we would need to reconsider other options if we chose to pursue a new textbook. Mr. Salmon, I agree. I'm concerned and questioning why we didn't do that more thoroughly. To the board. I too am questioning why that initial recommendation after initial questioning was then abandoned. I do still enjoy and prefer that textbook. A second selection is now under discussion, and there appears to be continued spirited debate. Voting against this textbook adoption is forcing next year's students to work with outdated materials that do not equally serve all students in the classroom. At the start of this school year, public schools across the country were reporting overwhelming vacancies, many of those from resignations. Teachers are leaving the field at a record pace. Teacher retention is a primary concern in nearly every district, including our own. I have heard many comments at board meetings discussing the importance and necessity of keeping our high-quality teachers in the district. As much as I appreciate the concern for our HVAC systems and rodent problems, addressing those issues are basic health and safety concerns that affect teachers and students equally. Teachers have been teaching in unair-conditioned rooms for decades, and I can assure you that fluctuating temperatures is not a driving force behind resignations in this district. However, being supported by our Board of Education, appreciation for our worth, and the role we play in this community is. Respect for teachers and trust in their abilities and sound judgment is paramount. Teachers do not teach textbooks, we teach curriculum. Textbooks are a resource to be used at the discretion of the professional in the classroom. We use our experience and expertise to navigate difficult topics and decide what and how we introduce information in our classrooms. We assess materials for bias, perspective, and accuracy. We use resources to encourage our students to be critical thinkers and to evaluate the materials for themselves. We are teaching our students to be active participants in their education and welcome opportunities for open dialogues about our coursework. We all want what is best for our students, and providing them with a high-quality education is what the board has entrusted to the teachers of this district. I ask the members of the board to please keep that in mind as we continue to serve our students together. Thank you. 268 South Finley.
Good evening. My name is Dan Norris. I've been a social studies teacher at Ridge for 8 years, teaching history courses as well as government economics. I'm here this evening to speak about the recent decision to not adopt a sociology textbook that was selected and vetted by multiple departmental colleagues and our department supervisor. Textbooks are imperfect tools. One of the first lessons that I designed at Ridge High School was a critical analysis of our textbook coverage on Christopher Columbus for our global history courses. Students discussed both the merits and shortcomings of Columbus and what his legacy should be in our modern era, but more importantly, why different books cover him in biased or inaccurate ways. By the end of the lesson, students conclude that textbooks can be inherently flawed and that multiple perspectives and sources should always be engaged before drawing conclusions on important topics. I bring in the example of this lesson to demonstrate that our department is teaching students how to critically analyze primary and secondary sources from day one. Even if a textbook had some sections that were slightly biased or incomplete in their coverage, we are denying students opportunities to learn if we make decisions that limit their access to these resources. Reading Howard Zinn does not transform students into socialists, just as learning supply-side economic theory does not have to make them Reaganites, just as reading Machiavelli does not convince them to attempt to dominate the Renaissance city-state of Florence. Our students' convictions and ability to detect bias is strong, and we should not sell them short. That includes my friend Petra over there. In our polarized political environment, I highly doubt that any true neutral textbook even exists for a course like sociology. Even sources as innocuous as the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal are regularly questioned as being too biased. A world where we introduce students to viewpoints from across the political spectrum with the guidance of an expert teacher is infinitely better than one in which we pre-filter sources for them, as reasonable adults cannot even agree on what a neutral source is. This became more true. I trust my colleagues to make good decisions about resources for our students. Most importantly, I trust our students to understand that no particular source can hold all of the answers and to never be afraid to question everything. In Gov and Econ, we grapple with the complexity of the political spectrum and what fundamental American ideals are. Our students are challenged to engage with ideas that range from moderate to extreme in class, and we help them build good habits to discern between quality information and biased sources. We cannot be successful in this endeavor if the trust and the support from the board freeze. We as educational professionals should and must be trusted to help students navigate these challenging issues. Academic freedom is a hallmark of a thriving democracy. We must work together to provide our students access to a wide array of resources and ideas to uphold that democratic ideal. Thank you for your time.
Hi, good evening. My name is Melanie Dupuy, 70 Quincy Road. I'm a social studies teacher at William Annan. I've been teaching here for 17 years. This public comment is very personal to me. I've always been very proud of my profession, very proud that I have worked here my entire career in a very respected school district. When my children were younger, I'm sure many of you remember, they would literally fall asleep in the aisles here at board meetings when they were little until my husband could get home and pick them up. That's how much I cared about my job and how much I loved working here, to be here every day for the last 7 years. I don't think it's a coincidence that my daughter, who is now 12, has always wanted to be a teacher because she saw my dedication. She would speak about it often, and I was always bragging and really proud that she wanted to follow in my footsteps. And I would always encourage her to follow that path. However, over the last few years, I have very overtly been pushing her in a different direction. There is no way I can still support my daughter going into the field of education. I've been encouraging her to pursue any other career where she will be respected and treated well, because that is no longer the field of education across the country, and more often than not, unfortunately, it's no longer how I feel working here in Bernards Township. Believe me when I say that I recognize that teachers are not infallible. I make mistakes all the time. The Board of Education are duly elected members of the community with an extremely important oversight and policy-making role. Like anyone else, I make mistakes. I'm always looking to grow and improve. But I also know that I've heard a lot of rhetoric from this board about supporting our staff and providing us with the tools we need to be successful. That rhetoric, as of late, does not seem to be matching up with specific actions and decisions. From the health curriculum to administrative staffing, lacking an AP at William Annan to personnel audits, it feels like our profession is constantly under attack and our expertise constantly disregarded. Which brings me to the textbook approval process in general and the sociology textbook specifically. I'm frankly embarrassed that my colleagues in the social studies department at Ridge are still without an approved textbook for 2023-2024 that is current and meets the needs of their population. This process began months ago. The sociology teacher, social studies supervisor determined a new book that would benefit students of diverse ability levels, work in tandem with the curriculum. The first textbook has already been discussed negatively at a public board meeting. The second one was just rejected. It is very disconcerting to see the personal beliefs of individuals on the board taint the process, bar professionals in the district from the materials they are requesting. I'm frankly embarrassed by some of the comments that I just heard. The amount of time and energy invested in appeasing the personal beliefs of a small group of board members is very alarming to me. Textbooks, I work with one myself, are one part of a larger curriculum and are never the sole arbiter of classroom material and information. After reviewing the material myself, I'm struggling to find the controversy. Specific pages and passages have been flagged that are well within mainstream sociology standards and operate in fact. For example, one passage from the text stated, quote, "Racist, sexist, and ethnocentric perspectives long dominated the field and passed for truth. For many years, scientific reality consisted only of the experience of white European males, and the realities of women, ethnic minorities, and other marginalized groups were categorically ignored or dismissed." Thank you. What is not factual about that statement? I cannot believe I had to say this in Basking Ridge in 2023, but facts do not care at all about your feelings, and it's very critical for board members to respect the professional autonomy of teachers and allow them to make informed decisions. This ensures that education remains focused on what's best for students. Thank you.
Good evening, 268 South Finley Avenue. My name is Janine Quimby, and I'm the new BTEA co-president. I've worked in Bernards Township for 16 years, and I teach in the ELA department at Ridge. I do teach AP English Language and Composition, and yes, I have read the AP English textbook. I'm standing here tonight in support of my fellow humanities teachers, especially those who have been working tirelessly to vet sociology textbooks. I know that book banning has received a lot of media attention over the past few years. English departments, media centers, and public libraries have all been on the receiving end of public scrutiny for one simple reason: fear. The fear I reference, however, isn't the students' fear of encountering new ideas. Rather, it's the Board of Education's fear of students encountering new ideas. Walk into any humanities classroom at the high school and listen to students discuss current events, social reform, and contemporary issues from multiple perspectives. For any student who leaves one of our classrooms knows that there are more than two sides to any given issue. Teachers guide students to look for that gray area, to explore the nuance, to understand why different points of view have merit, to change course when new evidence emerges. Here's what we don't do. We don't encourage students to quibble, to denounce what they don't yet understand, to remain steadfastly tied to outdated research, to let fiction rather than fact guide their arguments. If the board exercised even a modicum of the open-mindedness that the students do, this would be a very different public comment. Over the last 16 years, I have had the remarkable privilege of working with some of the brightest, most open-minded adolescents in the country. I don't say that speculatively. I'm a College Board-trained AP reader, and every year I read thousands of AP essays written by students from around the world. I state with confidence and certainty that our students outperform their national and international counterparts because of their exposure to a progressive curriculum. The refusal to approve an updated sociology textbook is book banning masquerading as protection. Silencing different points of view doesn't make them disappear. It only continues to bring them to the forefront. If you're truly fearful of students learning about different ideas, that says a lot about you, not so much about them. Here's what it says. I'm afraid that learning about a different point of view invalidates my own. Good. Sit in that uneasiness. Wallow in your discomfort. That's where the learning happens.
Good evening, Deirdre Batchelor, 70 Quincy Road. I am a co-president of the BTEA and a Spanish teacher at Mount Prospect and William Annan. I'm a teacher, and yet I can still recognize that I do not have the professional knowledge or background to question, comment on, or make any judgments otherwise about any sociology textbook that has been vetted and deemed qualified for the high school level class, because I am not a high school sociology teacher, and neither are any of you. The fact that anyone up there on that dais tonight, even remotely, believes that they are qualified to deny not one, but two textbooks for a curriculum that has passed the approval of the Ridge sociology teachers, the social studies supervisor, and the curriculum superintendent is absolutely disrespectful and shameful. There have been many times in the history of the world, and unfortunately in our own country, where books have been banned, educators have been censored, and free thinking has either been overtly or covertly attacked. It has often been veiled by the sentiment that people want to protect children. No one can deny that we want our children and our students to be safe. As I have stood here and I have said that before, I care very much for my students' safety. I want to keep them safe today and always. As we, the educators and the staff of Bernard Township, we can still do that, regardless of what a textbook says, because we know how to do our job. We are trained to be aware of and ready to address topics that may cause strife or concerned questions from kids. You have been told that LGBTQIA+ students are struggling. It was reported by Mrs. White during the Wellness Committee minutes how the book To Kill a Mockingbird has been causing some students discomfort, especially students of color. In those real-life, specifically identified situations where students and educators are asking for help, personal feelings are being thrown back at administrators and teachers about the efforts to help those kids. But we are here because you speculate that facts in a sociology textbook could make kids uncomfortable. A textbook which, just to remind everybody, has been vetted by the professionals in the field of sociology. That textbook is not going to stand in the way of teachers providing a safe, balanced learning environment. We know what to do. During the public debate, you threw teacher retention around like it was actually your political stance, something you were really concerned about for the future of the kids. Teachers going to Mendham, Chatham, and Summit, and any other district that you want to compare us to. Removing our professional autonomy in such a degrading way is sure to give us the red stamp that this is not the place to grow professionally. And if you are looking for a personnel audit, which, to bring back another point, I'm still not really clear exactly what that's for or what that's attempting to do. But if that's what you're looking for, if maybe you're trying to address staff needs, you can save your money. No problem. I'm on my last little part here. You can save your money. The first thing you need to do is trust us and let us do our jobs.
Anybody else for public comment?
Hi, Megan Dooley, 17 Brook Avenue. I will not be anywhere near as eloquent as all of our teachers just were, but I also want them to know that you are not alone here. There are parents in this district who feel exactly the same way you do. As a parent, I am horrified that our board's personal opinions about textbooks are overriding our professionals' vetting process. I am embarrassed that we are not trusting those professionals that have been hired by this district, that we are paying, that we are touting as the best and the brightest. As an educator, I can also say that there comes a tipping point in all of our educator lives where we say, this lack of trust and lack of respect is not worth it anymore. Even for the most dedicated of us, even for those of us who love our jobs, there comes a tipping point. And I fear, as a member of this community, that we are getting dangerously close to that point for many of our educators.
Good evening, and thank everyone for all their time and all their opinions. I'd like you to know, though, I am just a voter. And currently, Mary Urbis, 343 Gristmill Drive, Basking Ridge. I am a voter, and I am a very passionate voter, and will vote in all elections. I want you to know that I stand with our educational system and our teachers. And I think there's a lot of voices that not only do you need to hear, but you need to understand that perhaps the community does not agree with you, but that's why we are in a democracy. So thank you for your time, and please listen.
Cody Smith, 36 Royal Oak Drive. Thank you for the spirited discussion regarding the book. I think part of what I'd like to understand is a few things about the process, but moreover, all of the things that you mentioned about the book that are objectionable, there wasn't one board member or one person in the audience that disputed any of that, other than the one comment that I could dispute also. But that just goes to show the process is broken. If the teachers who are educated and the experts would have gone through and pointed out these sections and said, these are biased, these are one-sided, they're not factually supported, and then came up with a plan and addressed how they were going to take on those sections and balance those out as part of the textbook, then maybe we would have a different discussion. But the fact that nobody raised these as part of the review and they seem pretty clear based on what I've heard that they are one-sided and they're not factual, then perhaps the process is broken. The discussion ought to be more about that than just saying we're banning books. We should leave it to the educators. I won't reiterate that the board has their obligations. People have done that. Mr. Markarian did a good job, that it is your obligation to review everything and approve it. So we can't just leave it to the educators and the experts. You have to look at it. You have to come up with an informed decision, and that's what I've heard has been done tonight. Thank you.
Sherry Nelson, 195 Smoke Rise Road. I'm just completely confused. I have a kid with an IEP, and I just had an IEP meeting about a month ago, and they told me sociology was the class to take. So I think that kind of points out that you can't put everybody in a box and say, oh, this hurts all the kids with IEPs and all the kids with 504s or learning differences. In that meeting, it was Stephanie Orr, the supervisor of special ed at Ridge, that recommended that course for him and specifically said psychology wouldn't be a good idea for a kid with an IEP for a variety of reasons. So we do have that difficulty when we get to senior year. When we're looking for all these electives, because you really don't have the same options for the in-class support for your kids that you had 10th or your 9th, 10th, 11th grade. So I'm basically just sitting here going, what's true? I don't even know. Who do you listen to? I know Jean O'Connell knows what she's talking about. If the textbook's not accessible, why we've been using it for this long, I don't know. But there's 2 books to choose from and nothing else that could help. And what about kids with IEPs who have, anxiety or depression or mental health issues, and they internalize some of those bias things that are said if they happen to fit that category of what's being talked about? When you're looking at those kids who have those challenges, you really have to look at that emotional component as well, and would that bias hurt them? Reading that in the textbook. It would be great if the teachers are going to balance that out, but some of these kids are such literal black and white thinkers. They read it, it's true, and that's all they feel about themselves. I've had my son come home from social studies lessons, not sociology, upset about things he learned in class. He happens to be white, and white males are kind of being demonized in these classes in our district sometimes. It's not intentional, but these kids with these differences internalize the way it's presented. I don't mean the teachers are trying to teach that, but it's in some of the materials. And so the kids, some are getting that message. And so I kind of appreciate that we're trying to look at the big picture and what might hurt the kids. And then specifically regarding textbooks, I don't know if this textbook got updated this year. Someone could tell me. Last year, 10th grade U.S. history, the textbook was published in 2012, and now we're arguing about a 2014 book needing to be updated. That book and that class, the teacher didn't supplement it. The new law that was passed, I believe in 2019, that was supposed to be implemented in 2020, 2021, to be inclusive of LGBTQ and people with disabilities in our curriculum. When U.S. history got to civil rights, it was a lot about African American civil rights, and that was really heavy in the textbook. And then they had an assignment that was for other marginalized groups. And they did go outside the textbook, have the kids research on the internet. I know my time's up, I'll wrap it up, I promise. And they talked about LGBTQ, they talked about women's rights, they talked about Latino, they talked about every group under the planet, except for people with disabilities. So I got out the textbook real quick and just looked, and LGBTQ rights were at least mentioned in that textbook from over a decade ago. Nothing about IDEA, Section 504, ADA, nothing in that textbook about a disability, and no supplemental materials in the curriculum taught, at least to my son's class. And so trust the teachers. I do trust the teachers. I love our teachers, but things do get overlooked. And so to just say, oh, it's all going to get in there just because we think it will. I like what Mr. Smith said about, well, if you're presenting a textbook, then present the ideas of how you're going to supplement it. Thanks.
Debbie Marcus, 16 Lafayette Lane. In 8th grade, my older son was given an assignment to write why the book in their class should be banned, why To Kill a Mockingbird should be banned. His teacher, and seemingly her peers, would have preferred to not have to teach that book. So although I do definitely think teachers have a major input into suggesting and recommending books, it is a group effort, and the board is, in the end, on the hook for any results that come of it. So it is appropriate for the recommendations to come from the teachers, but for them to be reviewed. Now, there's been discussion about qualifications and things like that. Certainly, someone with no connection should not have a say from outside the community. I do have a PhD from the Graduate School of Education at the University of Pennsylvania, and I did focus on curriculum. So I don't usually like to mention that, but people seem to think that otherwise parents shouldn't have any say. A book having pictures and bigger words and just to be accessible doesn't guarantee that the content is good. If every page of that book was touting anti-trans student ideology, I don't think we would be having this discussion. I hope we would not be having this discussion. This book does not do that, thank God, but has a different ideology permeating every page. And actually, I got a little concerned when teachers were saying that they didn't even see that there was any bias. So I just do want to appreciate, or state that I appreciate the process that's been going through. People are acting like it's impossible to have a sociology book that doesn't present opinions as facts and that presents both sides within the book so that the teacher doesn't have to supplement every single item or expect the student to be able to, especially if it's a subject that the student is first being exposed to in the class. Thank you.
Nestlehan Montag, 41 Essex Place. Thank you, teachers. We are so fortunate to have such passionate, caring, intelligent, and insightful educators teaching our children. What a shame it is that members of this board are taking actions that threaten to drive them away, not supporting their needs, like APs, not respecting their professional judgment in choosing curriculum and textbooks, and trying to micromanage them and basically treading where they shouldn't. We know public comment isn't Q&A, but your statement of public notice does say that the board considers all public comments, investigates, addresses, and responds to them as much as possible during forum or committee reports. Most of the time, people get up here and speak. The only response is silence, and then anyone else for public comment? So when our community comes and expresses their concerns to you, we ask and we expect that you'll actually listen and respond with more than just vague platitudes, that everyone's welcome to speak here. We hear a lot about your personal views, but we don't hear a whole lot of indication that you're considering the community's views when you're up there. We can talk till we're blue in the face, but public comment is entirely meaningless if you're just going to continue to ignore what this community is telling you loud and clear. And this community is increasingly concerned that this board has shown a disturbing pattern of ignoring public concerns, ignoring expert advice, and trying to substitute its own uninformed judgment over those more qualified, whether it's choosing textbooks or retaining APs. That means seasoned administrators, veteran board members, and experienced educators who are all better qualified than you to make these decisions. Far better suited than any of you to understand the implications of those decisions, and they're the ones who will be left to clean up the mess when you're no longer on this board, but these kids are still continuing to feel the impacts of your short-sighted decisions. You passed a preliminary budget that funded 11 APs. Based on this morning's comments, it sounds like some of you have already made up your mind to cut the APs no matter what. We were told not to be surprised if at the May 8th budget, we don't have 11 APs. One board member just pretty much threw up his hands and said, oh, well, this may just be one of those areas where we have to agree to disagree. It's not. It is your duty as board members to move past your differences. Take the time to address these issues responsibly with our students' best interests in mind. You're starting to do it with school start times, great. Maybe that's a good source of savings that'll help save our APs. But people have been telling you for months now about the devastating impacts of losing APs. Studies have confirmed the rising incidence of HIBs, behavioral problems, increased anxiety, depression, lingering COVID delays. Numbers in January, we're told, are already more than we saw the entire year before. You've heard it from our principals, teachers, administrators, counselors, showing you studies, reporting at committee meetings, writing letters, emails, speaking at public comment, and you continue to ignore their concerns. Okay, you've got a mountain of evidence on one side telling you that cutting APs is a horrible idea, and you've got this year's experience that proves it. What is on the other side? Anything? Have you had one single educator tell you that it's a good idea to cut APs? It was stunning this morning after listening for almost 2 hours to example after example of people talking about kids in crisis who are not getting the support they need because APs are missing. It was stunning to hear a board member say, we don't have kids in crisis. There is such a major disconnect with the realities of our district, so please help us understand. What do you need us to do to actually get you to listen? What do you need to hear from us? Okay, well, oh man, there's way too much. Anyway, listen to our teachers, listen to our community. Stop inserting your views where they don't belong. Thank you.
Hi, Ryan Parker, 44 Deer Creek Drive. I just want to thank the people who went after the teachers for making it a slightly easier transition. You guys would have been a tough act to follow. As we are now just 2 weeks out from the finalized budget presentation and vote, I would like to stand up here and ask you to maintain 11 assistant principals across our schools. But at this point, that feels a bit like shouting into the wind. So what I am hoping for instead is a little clarification on a few points. Number one, is there a quantifiable goal that you are trying to achieve? We understood that there was a goal of a 0% tax increase, which was reached with the budget that was voted on a month ago. That budget included 11 assistant principals. Then a directive was given to look for additional ways to cut administrative costs. So clearly more is desired, but is there a dollar amount that is now the goal, or just a more nebulous, let's make some more cuts objective? Number two, if additional savings are found by not filling open AP positions or reducing further AP positions, what is the plan for that money? Will it be reallocated to other areas? And if so, in what ways? Or is there another allocation for it? Number three, what is the benefit to students of a reduction in administrators? The financial implications are apparent, but is there a demonstrated benefit to students by having fewer administrators in the building? And number four, if administrators are reduced at Whams or Ridge, then each remaining administrator would be responsible for overseeing more students. This will obviously expand their workload with regard to the more traditional principal roles like disciplinary issues, INRS meetings, etc. But each assistant principal at Ridge has other programs that they are also in charge of overseeing. As an example, at Ridge, Mrs. Howarth runs, or ran prior to the school sharing model, programs like Option 2 and the Late In Early Out program. Other assistant principals at Ridge are responsible for safety and security, facilities management, which we all know can be quite time-consuming, and HIB. I believe the assistant principals at Whams have similar responsibilities for things like aftercare and other programs. Who will take over these jobs if there are fewer assistant principals? Will they be granted a stipend for doing so? And if the capacity of the remaining people in the building is such that they can't handle these additional jobs, what will have to be cut? If not these programs, will other things need to go in order to make time for these? In short, I would like to move past broad statements and begin to understand specific plans as they relate to this situation. Thank you.
Hi, my name's David Shaw. I'm at 86 Atlas Road, and you just stole some of my thunder, but I'll repeat some of it. I wasn't planning to talk about books, but I'll start there. First, I just want to thank all the teachers. They spoke so well on this, so I'm not going to repeat a lot of what they said because they did a really good job, but I'll say that I have young kids in the district, so please don't leave. My kids definitely need you, so that's why we moved here. That's why most people moved here. And our district has been great for so many years, so please, as board members, listen to our teachers. That's why we're doing so great. That's why we've always done so great. So to dismiss them the way you have just makes no sense. So the reason I'm here is I just want to come up and thank Mr. Simpola. My older daughter goes to Cedar Hill, and she says he's a great principal. And every day when I drive up and drop her off, he's always so personable. So I just want to thank him. So when I told my daughter that he's retiring after this year, the first thing she said to me is she said, Dad, what's retiring? So then I explained to her what that meant, and then she started to tear up. So I just wanted to let him know, if he's listening, that he did mean a lot to the kids. But then I told her that maybe they'll make Miss Euler the next principal, and that made her a little happier. But she said she's really going to miss Mr. Simpola, so just so you know that. And I know you have to do your due diligence, but from what I have experienced, Miss Euler would be a great principal. The problem is that the superintendent's hands are tied. If he promotes her from assistant principal, he won't be able to rehire for that position and lose his administrator. So if I'm in his position, I wouldn't hire her, which is terrible for her, but he's going to lose an administrator. So I just think the way we set it up doesn't make sense. I think you have to re-look at how you did that motion. There's a better way to do it. So I guess I'd like to have an update. Did we cut enough already? Whatever it was, 300,000 to say we can hire assistants? Or are you going to come back and say, okay, you can hire someone lower level, like a director or a supervisor, to do those roles? I hope you're not just saying we're going to lose those positions altogether, because I think the kids are really going to be hurt by that. There's too many things that they have to do. So if you're going to do a different level, say that to us. If we cut already enough, say that to us. We just want to know what the direction's going to be. So I just hope you're not just cutting support staff and all our kids are going to be hurt. So thank you.
Anyone else for public comment? Anybody online?
He's connecting. I don't think it's going to go. It's not connecting. No, it's not working.
The online option's not working. At this point, we're going to close public comment and move on to board forum. Ms. White.
I just want to say that I'm looking out and I see so many teachers that my children have or have had out in the audience, and I recognize that you've been here since, the wee hours of the day teaching my children, other people's children, and I recognize the fact that you're here and you're sitting through all this is because you are so dedicated and passionate and care so deeply about the topic that we've been talking about. I don't think that people necessarily go into education because they want thank yous, because it tends to be a thankless job, and you do it because you have a love of the subject you're teaching and you have a love of working with kids and shaping them and helping them to become the best that they can be and learn to be critical thinkers. It's a call. I truly believe that. And I just want to say thank you. It really saddens me to have heard the parent, who's also an educator, come forward and say that her fear is that you're reaching a tipping point, because that's my fear too. We've been asked before, like, why are the reasons teachers are leaving? And it's not because of the fact that you don't love your students or you don't love what you teach, but some of it is due to the lack of respect that you feel you're being given for your experience and for your dedication to providing excellence to our kids. And I just want to make it clear that we see you, we hear you, and we thank you.
Mr. Salmon.
I need to leave, so I need to excuse myself, so I'm going to exit stage left. Thank you.
Have a good trip.
So I just wanted to bring up something about the textbook process that two people mentioned. You know, why didn't the teachers present a book and say, I mean, it's a sociology book, so are there going to be controversial topics in it? I assume so, right? It's a current events thing. So why didn't the teachers present, you know, some topics in the book and say, this isn't, you know, there could be more description or discussion of this as to like both sides of the issue or whatever it is. That process can happen. Clearly the teachers felt strongly about the book and felt that it did present like the right amount of information for students in the class. But even if they don't present it that way, the curriculum committee looks at the book and it's open to everybody in the public to look and bring their issues to us. So if you have an issue with the book, it can still get approved, but with the idea that, okay, this issue needs some more further explication in the book. Okay, that's fine. Like a teacher now knows that and it's flagged for them when they write the curriculum over the summer. That's not a ridiculous thing to think, and it's already built into the process. So somebody said, yeah, sometimes things get overlooked. Yeah, sometimes things do get overlooked. That's why we try to backstop this with the teachers present the book, the curriculum committee reviews it, everybody on the board reviews it, all the concerns, the other books that are raised. So that's already there. And if there is an issue with some part of the book, regardless of what book it is, it can be addressed through summer curriculum writing or supplemental materials. But that's no reason to hamstring the teacher and say, I'm not going to give you this resource that you've looked at and you think it's appropriate for the students in the class. So it's that idea of the teachers presenting, it's whether they present it or the board members present it, it doesn't matter. It can all be addressed through the curriculum committee process. The other thing I wanted to say was, you know, two people from the public brought up what's the result, what's the goal, and Jen mentioned this too. Like, I don't know. I don't know. I think, you know, from our discussion in the curriculum committee meeting, some people that objected to the sociology book just said, just get a new version of the old book. And Mr. Terry, who's our social supervisor, said, well, the updated version of the new book doesn't even mention COVID. So like, that was kind of a big sociological, you know, event that happened. So it might, you know, find a place in a sociology book. But it still didn't alleviate the problems of inaccessibility and dryness that was with the current version of the book. So again, I don't understand, like, you vote no, totally fine, that's, you know, within your right to do, but then what's next? You know, use the current book? Nobody seems to like that, that's in the class or instructing in the class. Go find a different book? Well, we found two and we're not really having any back and forth on it. We're just saying, I found this sentence, I found this, I don't like this. So it can't be that, oh, okay, your concern is noted, we'll bake it into the summer curriculum writing so that when the teacher gets to this point in the book, if they actually do, then, you know, we have some comments from the board members or the public or students or whoever had an issue with it. So I think that's, you know, what I'm feeling right now is I'm not sure where we're headed a little bit. And it's really the same thing for the assistant principal. I have no idea. We're looking at one assistant principal position in the middle school. I don't know why that is our, like some folks' laser focus is on this one position. I don't understand, like, you know, that one position, like I've said a million times, is not a cost driver. Administrative structure you can look at, administrative costs you can look at, but there's a whole other kind of, if your goal is to reduce spend, then look at where we are spending the most, right? And how can we mitigate that? I don't understand the laser focus on this one role and kind of holding everything up, the budget vote, whether we can hire this position or whether we will never fill it or whether it's just kicking the can down the road. I don't understand that because it's not based on any reasonable analysis as far as I can see or any rationale as far as I can tell. So I don't know what the goal is, and if the goal is to just cut that position, then what, right? Then what's next? What are we doing? Are we keeping, what is in your head if you're saying, I don't want that position? Do you want to have assistant principals in every building? Do you want to have none at the elementary school? Do you want to have 2 at Whams? Do you want to have none at Ridge? What is the plan? I don't, and I think some of the folks are saying, well, it doesn't matter. We'll just say, we don't want that position filled and let the administration figure it out. And I guess, again, that strikes me as entirely arbitrary because it has no reasoned basis for it. So to that end, with the sociology textbook, the assistant principal position, the health curriculum, like, I'm not sure what the goal is. And it could be different for everybody, which is fine. I don't really care, it doesn't have to be a collective goal for a group of people or whatever. I just want to understand for somebody that takes a position, just what is your intent? Where do you want to go? And I don't see, well, I just want to cut this and, figure it out later as like a really prudent way to proceed.
Mr. Raggio.
When you say there's no reasonable basis for the AP, what do you mean?
Why do you want to cut that one position as opposed to any other position in the district?
Well, okay.
Yeah.
Is it not worth looking at?
100%.
Okay, so that's what we're doing.
No,
we're looking at it and we're saying, okay, enrollment has gone down 20%, and it's time to rethink our structure. That's all we're asking, is rethink the structure. Do we need, 3 at Whams? Do we need 4 at Ridge? Could maybe some at Ridge move down to replace any elementary school ones and give more college guidance counselors to the things that the students need in 11th and 12th grade?
You're shooting first and asking questions later.
No.
You're not filling the position and then asking all these questions.
Okay, no. That's what you guys did last year. You shot first, you didn't fill the position. So we're asking
and now the feedback
reevaluate.
came, you did a bad job. Things got overlooked, like somebody said.
We don't want you to continue to do a bad job.
You didn't understand the ramifications, fully understand the ramifications of what you did. Okay, we made a mistake. Like, I supported that last year. I supported that. I said, we're not going to be able to fill this position because it was in the middle of the year and we wouldn't probably get a good candidate at that time. And like you said, enrollment's going down. So let's try it.
Yeah.
It didn't work. As far as I can tell, nobody's telling me it worked.
Okay.
Nobody's saying it worked.
That's fine. But where's the quantifiable proof that it didn't work?
Every person
here? Or every person
the 0 people saying you did a great job and it worked great. That's the zero, quantity.
There's
zero.
a lot of people here. There's a lot of people.
No, I'm saying that all the 0 people that wrote in and said you did a great job, there's 0 of them.
Okay, so do you think, though, that a 20% decline in enrollment, and we have more administrators than we did in 2013, 2014, which was our peak enrollment, we have more now, that makes sense? It's not worth looking at?
It's entirely worth looking at.
And that's all we're doing?
No, we're not. We're looking at it after we say, don't fill this position. Somebody from the public just said it.
Okay.
You're hamstringing this and focusing on this one position. Why is it this one thing? Why isn't it anything else?
The best time to, it's this one position.
We're gonna,
there is a lot
Mr. Amino
more.
come in a second.
There is a lot more that we're looking at.
But
you saw what Mr. Markarian sent out to us. We all have to reevaluate it. But it's not just this one position. So do you think it makes sense, though, to hire somebody that we may have to get rid of because we're down 20%, right? And we're going to take another administrator on and increase our administrative staff to levels that were higher than 2013, 2014. It just makes no sense not to look at it. So it's not just this one position, it's everything.
You keep saying that and
it's
caveating
everything.
with it.
It's
you have to look
everything.
at it. Yes.
It's everything.
Nobody's saying no to that.
Okay.
Nobody's saying no.
So then
It's
what's
saying
your proposal? We hire somebody, then figure it out?
we hire somebody because the budget we just passed includes salary and benefits for 11 assistant principals.
And if we don't use it for 11 assistant principals, we can use it for something else, no? Guidance counselors, college counselors for seniors?
But again, there's no plan. You're just speculating now on the fly.
It's not my job to make the plan, dude. It's
right.
their job to give us a plan that we can approve.
You guys come up with a plan.
Yes,
and
that's the
then
job.
we will implement,
Look,
assess it.
If
but
throwing
you're
money,
saying don't fill this position, then come up with a plan, then we assess it, and meanwhile we're going ahead with nobody in that role.
Okay.
So it's backwards. It's completely
no,
backwards.
No. It's not. You don't hire somebody, fill a role, and then say we might need to get rid of you.
You're an investment guy, right? You go pick a stock. You just pick one out of the air, and then you do your due diligence on it and say, did this work?
Well, that's what you guys did, but I would never do that.
Yeah, no.
I would never do that.
But
I would never do that.
We did it based on your criteria. We did it based on declining enrollment.
Okay.
It did not work.
Says who?
The 0 people that are coming here every day and saying you did a great job.
Okay.
And everybody that does come here says, do you think people take the time out of their day to come here to say we need assistant principals for no reason?
Do we need more administrators than we needed at our peak in 2013-14? Do we need more now?
People are saying yes. The experts are.
Okay.
Even if we don't.
Okay.
Even if we don't.
Right.
Shouldn't we find that out first before we cut that role? You're just doing it based on declining enrollment.
We're not cutting anything. We're just not hiring. We're reassessing.
All right, I think at this point you two are talking at each other. We're going to let some other people chime in. Ms. McKeown, please.
I'm also equally frustrated. We've heard repeatedly that it didn't work. We understand that things are different now than they were in 2013. Okay, we thought coming out of the pandemic that maybe things would get better faster, right? I mean, we hired extra teachers during the pandemic. We deliberately brought all these extra teachers into the district because we knew the kids needed it, right? So then, okay, that was over. We went back to school in person.
But then you let 7 go last year. You let 7 teachers go last year.
Well, because we had hired 15 extra ones for virtual teachers that year. So we didn't need virtual teachers anymore. So we went back to normal, and we're thinking things are going to get normal. And so we're looking into declining enrollment, which prior to the pandemic, we had said if enrollment starts to go down significantly, we will eventually look at administrative structure, okay? So now we're finding out the kids have different needs, completely different needs. Maybe we need twice as many guidance counselors than we ever had before. We don't know exactly what we need, but clearly we're hearing across the country, not just here, that there's a major problem, okay? So we have to figure it out. And so to make the decision arbitrarily about this position just because someone left in the middle of the year last year and not do a thorough analysis when we have a budget that was proposed with 11 assistant principals with a 0% tax increase that we can sustain for this year while we examine this doesn't make any sense.
But you just said we may need 20 more counselors. And I agree with you. We may need it, but we need to assess that. We need to
take time to do it in a thoughtful manner without making an arbitrary decision and not being able to fill roles when it's hiring season.
How do you know you don't need the AP and 20 counselors?
I don't know.
No, you're right. We don't know. We don't know. That's what I'm saying.
So are you going to shoot first and hire somebody and then decide that we need 20 counselors?
Yes, because we've already passed it. We've already tried to do it. We're not shooting first because we tried to do it based on declining enrollment.
Okay.
We tried to do that.
Okay.
I was supportive of that.
Okay.
It did not work. You're saying there's some other information out there that it did work. What is that?
No. I'm not saying it did work. I'm not saying it did work.
Right, so
but
then
your
what's
justification for saying it didn't work doesn't really hold. It doesn't make any sense. It didn't work.
Well, I'm an elected representative, and 0 people are telling me that it worked. So
So what do you personally think?
I think it did not work.
Based on?
Based on nobody telling me it worked.
But so not on any kind of quantitative, maybe we should rejigger things, we should reassess things. Nothing like that. It's just what people tell me.
Well, I'm not an expert in administrative staffing. So we're going through the exercise of looking at peer districts and how their staffing looks. I'm happy to do that. I think it's a great exercise.
I have it right here. Do you want to go through it? I have every single number right here.
No, because nobody else has it. Nobody else has it.
No, Mr. Marcarian sent it, and I just kind of...
Yeah, I know, right. So,
okay.
All right. If you want to look at administrative structure or any other cost center in the district, that's entirely fine. I would propose look at the cost drivers, those things that are increasing substantially. Transportation, that's a big one. Special education, that's a big one. as you saw on Mr. Markarian's spreadsheet, right? We're the highest extraordinary aid receiving district on that 20-peer list by 25 to 30%, right? So that means that our per pupil costs on that spreadsheet are high because we have a high special needs population, which we support in this district, right? So that doesn't mean that we should just focus on the assistant principal at our middle school.
I agree.
Okay, so then, to get to the point of where we can save money, you need some analysis and some rationale. But if you're arbitrarily focusing it, your goal is already set up. Cut the AP position or get rid of that AP position.
My goal is to make sure that we're running efficiently and that the administrative
How do you know
needs-
that? How do you know that?
How do you know
I don't know. I'm asking, can we do that analysis? Can we look at that before we decide not to do something?
Yes, that's what we should be doing. Before we elect to hire somebody, we should be looking at that.
But we've already
stop.
tried it.
You stop.
We've already
But
tried.
efficiency is not the only
This argument's
metric.
becoming circular again. Let's have a couple other people an opportunity to chime in here. Ms. White.
I just want to address your question about who's saying that, who says there's a need, because as the past chair of curriculum and the present chair of wellness, I have spent hours writing and reporting out on data provided from every single principal, from Mrs. Smith, the supervisor of guidance, and all of the feedback has been about the increase in crises our children are facing. All of the data has been about the holes between William Annan and Ridge because we have somebody covering two places, that there are needs that aren't being met. The data has been delivered by our administrators. And I think we need to be consistent. So if we're going to say, well, let them figure it out, right? You said, that was expression said, like, we'll do the cut and they can figure out how the work's gonna get redistributed. Well, how come that's okay, but it's not okay for our teachers to do the work and make a recommendation about textbooks, and we're not saying to them, that's okay, we'll let them figure it out. We need to have some consistency across the board. And you don't like the word trust? I'm sorry, it comes down to that. We need to believe when Mrs. Huda comes to us and she says she is struggling by not having 3 APs. When Dr. Lazovic says that it is hard for him to manage without 4 APs. We need to believe them. It's not just about efficiency. I said this in a meeting earlier. Use the word efficiency when you're talking about HVAC systems. Use the word excellence when you're talking about the education of our children and how it's delivered. And I agree. We can look at, and we will look at, how costs can be cut. But it needs to be done in a thoughtful way. And just hammering out back and forth and saying, I'm not saying that. Well, yes, you are saying, well, I'm not. The reality is, it has been said, we don't want to fill the 11 AP positions. That's the one thing that with the board, we passed the budget, and 4 seconds later, that was the motion that was made, not to fill that position. So when Mr. Salmon says, yes, I'm willing to look at it, but let's look at the whole picture. Looking at that whole picture is going to take us some time. So we need to just be transparent with the public and say, this is going to take a while.
I think you're saying exactly what I'm saying.
No, I'm not.
No, it's going to take a while.
No, I'm not.
Are you saying hire somebody first and then?
I'm saying we have 11 APs in the budget. Let's keep the budget the way it is. There's a reason why we made it that way, and spend this next year doing everything that we've said. Get the demographer's report. We don't really know what enrollment truly is because we haven't done one since, I'm not even sure how many years ago, it was before COVID, okay? But it's not just enrollment, and I know that you'd like to look at the numbers and say the numbers should be driving that. But again, I said this earlier, it's not the numbers that should be the driving force, it's the need. And if the need is greater, we need to address that. Doesn't mean forever. It doesn't mean we never can look at going down, but right now our need is great and we need to address that. So keeping status quo for another year does no harm to our students. It only benefits them. But cutting a position and then saying, well, we're going to divvy out this work now. Now this teacher is going to take on this responsibility and that teacher is going to take on that responsibility. When they're overburdened, they don't feel trusted, they don't feel valued, they don't feel respected. We're going to have more teachers walking out the door, and I don't want to see that happen.
Anybody else? Mr. Mead?
I want us to start talking about the academic scores of the district, where all the students are performing, and where we have to help the COVID loss, the middle-of-the-road students who are doing middle-of-the-road-ish, maybe a little bit worse, and then the competitive students who aren't doing as competitively as they have been. So I want us to see us improve academics before we double down on more administrative costs. I think we have to look at the overall financial picture, we have to look at the overall wellness of the students, and we have to look at academic performance. And we've asked Mr. Markarian to look at administrative cost structure. Let's actually see the data that Larry mentioned he has provided. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about the academic needs of our students, and then decide where the money is best allocated. And until we do that, it doesn't make sense to hire somebody instead of reallocating those resources where they may be better served.
Ms. Here.
I agree with you, Nimish, that we need to look at the academics, but in order to do that, we need to trust our teachers, give them the resources that they need, so then they can help provide the education that our students deserve.
Anybody else? Mr. Kuhn?
I feel like we're just talking in circles about this position, and it's driving me crazy. Okay, so we want to look at the overall administrative structure. No one is arguing with that. We have this big spreadsheet that Mr. Markarian and other administrators put together with all kinds of data in it, comparing us to other districts, comparing us to 2013. We haven't even had time to discuss yet. So to hold everything up this spring and not fill these positions that are in our budget, while we wanted to look at all this data, which is a lot of stuff to consider, and there's a lot of other ways we could save money that isn't in that spreadsheet that we should be talking about, and a lot of other factors, doesn't make any sense. So I'm just completely confused why we can't get past that point and just move forward.
Anybody else report for him?
I do, and I was just asking Jen, but I guess I'll ask, just a little lost. With the sociology book, what's the next step? Do we just use the same book?
For now.
Motion to adjourn? One, second? Ms. Chipak, all in favor? Any opposed? All right. Meeting's adjourned.